And welcome to the workshop that we called for Thursday, April 23rd. I'd like to start off with a update on COVID-19. Mr. Manager, I'll turn it over to you for the update.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, councilors. Nice to see you all on a nice day. So we're going to start off with Deputy Fire Chief Matt Fifield, our safety coordinator. He's going to give an update on COVID-19. He's been doing a really good job along with the other folks on the emergency management team. And then Phil is going to speak. Phil is our emergency management director. And Mark Goslin will give you an update on the recovery team that we have formed and the work that we're doing on that. Matt?
Good evening, Council, Mayor Hvac. Give you a quick update as it pertains to the COVID-19 pandemic. Cases here in the state of Maine, 937. That is an increase of 30 as of today. Recovered, people have recovered from COVID-19, 485. That is an increase of 30 for today. The death toll is at 44 for the state of Maine. That is an increase of 5 today. So that brings our active cases to 408 in the state right now. So the difference between the cases, confirmed cases, recovered, and the deaths. So 408, important number to focus on. Just to give you kind of a reference check from this week, last time we were at 436 active cases. So this week at 408. Currently hospitalized in the state of Maine, 42. That number last week was more closely here in Androscoggin County, 37 confirmed cases with 15 of those being active. And one still only confirming one death related to COVID-19. Our active cases in Androscoggin County last week at this time, just as a reference, was 18. Also, some good news is there's in the state of Maine, they've administered 16,784 negative tests. More closely here in Auburn, I'm sure you saw the news related to John F. Murphy Home and the outbreak that they had there. Just as a quick update, we have been in contact with the directors in that facility and the nursing staff. They've been very forthcoming with the information. We've helped them through the process yesterday along with the CDC. And I'm happy to report that the 3 patients, positive cases of COVID-19, they've actually been moved out of the city of Auburn. And the 14 employees that they've identified to having some level of contact have been identified, been quarantined, and were administered tests today. That was in conjunction with the Maine CDC. So we should get those results back in a few days. But I'm pretty confident, they're pretty confident, and they got a good handle on the situation over there. Also staying in contact with our local nursing homes, and nothing to report there. No active cases or outbreaks in any of the other nursing homes being reported to us. Also happy to report our public safety divisions, our police, fire, and 911 systems still operating at full staffing. Call volume still remains to be low or below average for us. And finally, I'll just touch on the trending data that we all use to determine the different actions that we're going to take. And I'm happy to report the trending data is continuing to be a very, very positive in nature. It's still looking like the beginning of the second week of May that will put us in a really good place. And they're even hinting at with some social distancing guidelines that we could start trending towards reopening some parts of our systems around locally. So all good news there. We're heading the right direction. And that's the end of my report for today.
Mayor, councilors, any questions or comments? Councilor Lasagna.
Thank you, Deputy Chief. I really appreciate that. When they talk about perhaps certain parts of our opening up the community, do they talk about anything specific or just very generally?
No, not specifics. I did try to watch parts of the news conference today, and unfortunately haven't been able to see the entirety of it. But they just hinted about moving in that direction, but with no specifics.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? Deputy Chief, thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Assistant City Manager, Phil Kroll. Phil has been doing a great job as well. And is actually taking the initiative and lead on reopening city government, starting to look at some things in order to do that, just to be prepared, to be thinking ahead, looking to the future. Phil?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. One of my primary focuses is regarding operations and how does the operations within the city function, especially during this pandemic. The team has done a great job when we had to close everything down. Now we've been brainstorming on what does it look like when we do reopen. So we have been working on a transition plan. We have a really decent layout of how we will proceed. We really are gearing towards May 4th as at least transitioning for certain staff coming back into their normal functions, not necessarily open to the public. We'll wait to hear what that looks like. The governor did send out a press release today, this afternoon. We had really hoped that we were going to get some information on what the reopening was going to look like. The only thing that was listed in there was a portal for comments from the public to provide to her regarding the reopening. She is focused on economic development department, providing some assistance in that decision, as well as public health organizations. The press release did state that currently the stay-at-home order is still in effect until April 30th. That's the current date on the stay-at-home order, with no changes yet. So we'll see what ends up happening. Hopefully within the next few days. We have 1 week until that order ends. Whether or not that'll be extended or if essential services change. My guess is that's what we'll see. I think we'll see a slow reopening, and certain essential businesses will change in that. So for municipal buildings, we're focused on what our facilities that we have public access and the ones that we know will need to ramp up public access to sooner than later. Obviously, Auburn Hall is one of the primary location where the public has access here. We are working on what that will look like, how we can restrict a certain amount of public into the building, where they will go for services, how we'll give good social distancing when they come in to do their business. That means reallocating certain staff to help facilitate that. So we are working through that with our team, and we are putting systems in place as far as plexiglass, as far as hand sanitizing stations for the public when they come in, and then also restricting access to the employees' private workstations. We're going to limit exactly where the public will come to, and so that way all public comes to one area. There's one person making that contact, and we might rotate that person out, but it just won't be the way we've always done business. So things will change as people come in. We are looking at creating opportunities for Dropbox so that somebody who just needs to drop off their payments, or they just need to drop off plans for planning and permitting or a license application, they'll be able to do that from out in the parking lot and not even need to come into the building. So we're looking to ensure that we're protecting the public and our staff and still providing a good access to city business. And we'll work on other facilities as well, as far as what we open and when we open those facilities. Staffing plans, we are focused on that. We are identifying which employees could continue working at home until we know that we're in a good place. Those employees that are functioning well there, they're able to do 100% of their work from home. We'll continue looking at using that as a viable option, especially if we have somebody with potential health risk or something else. So we are identifying key positions. We, as I mentioned earlier, we will be looking to start transitioning staff back May 4th and start working on creating those workflows that we need to put in place. We will continue with social distancing as far as internal meetings for the time being, and still using Zoom, MS. We have Microsoft Teams that we use as well. We'll continue utilizing that to ensure that we're reducing as many face-to-face meetings as possible. And then we're also looking at staggering certain shifts. So rather than having the entire Public Works Department all come in and report at the same time and have a large group there, we might stagger not just Public Works, but a lot of the departments with 15-minute staggered times. So that way there we're only bringing in a certain amount of people at one time. And we will be creating here at Auburn Hall a central location where staff will enter the facility all through one building. We will have a self-screening station that is set up. So employees will need to answer the questions that are on there. They'll take their temperature before coming in, and that will all be set up prior to actually entering the building in the second floor catwalk. So we are working through that to ensure we've got a safe option there for when employees do come in. So if somebody is ill or their temperature record's high, there'll be a process there for them to go through to ensure they're connecting with the right staff. So we are looking at supplies, ensuring that we have supplies for staff that will really, masks will be used for employees who cannot have a good social distance space because of the work that they're doing. If they can't, then masks will be available for those staff members to continue working. We have a good system in place. If somebody does test positive or has certain symptoms, that's in place now. We'll be continuing that process moving forward, making adjustments as the CDC outlines for us. We are working through ensuring that we have proper cleaning of the facility, deep cleaning on a regular basis. That's all being scheduled and contracted to ensure that we have a safe environment for our staff. As far as public meetings, I think our goal, based on the council's conversation in previous meetings, was to try to bring the council back to a meeting on May 4th. We'll still be under the 10 person restriction at that time. So we are making, the IT staff is working on ensuring what that will look like to still allow for public participation. And we are working on that, and we'll continue rolling this out. We're going to continue having other committees and boards still meet remotely for the time being. We also have a team that's looking at the voting for July 15th, if that's going to still be the date that we'll be focused on. That team is looking at all of our polling locations, looking at how we bring schools will not be open, so we'll be able to access the building differently than we may normally access the building during a normal election. So that will allow for queuing up, staggering people, keeping good distance. So when people come to the voting locations, but also providing an opportunity for those who, seniors, someone who might have a physical impairment, on how they can access the building without going through any real major challenges. Creating a safe space for our election wardens and poll workers to ensure that they're creating a good space. We'll be looking at the polling locations, measuring out good space for when somebody comes in. So even our polling locations may look different, but we'll be communicating that and educating the public as we move forward. So that's the transitioning planning that's underway. That's different than recovery. That's transitioning as far as local government, what we're doing to prepare.
Nice summary, Phil. I see a question from Council Lasagna.
Thank you. My children aren't in the public schools, so I'm curious. So they have officially called off Auburn schools for the rest of the year?
I don't have that information. I don't think they have.
I don't either, Council Lasagna. I can confirm that with Superintendent, unless someone here knows.
I haven't
You
heard.
know what the last day of school is, June 5th.
June 5th.
So July 15th would obviously be past that. Councilor Carrier, you had a
They're
meeting
not
last night. Is there any other update?
I'm just curious about the official, because people have asked me and I don't know what to tell them about the schools. That's what my question was about the voting.
Well, June 5th is official last day.
Yep. They're not planning right now. There's no plan to return. They've been listening daily to the briefings, and with the way that they're going right now, there's no plan to return. They're just planning on finishing up the year the way they are.
Okay. Thank you, Councilor Carey. Any other questions or comments for Phil? That was pretty comprehensive, Phil. Good job. There's a lot of work going on, as you can tell. The emergency management team meets twice a week, and they're doing a lot of planning, thinking, which we're very fortunate to have them do. We've got a great team. Mark Goslin. Mr. Goslin is the Executive Director for Municipal Partnerships and Sports Tourism. Did I get that title right, Mark?
Pretty close.
Okay. What is the title? Let's get that correct.
Community. The only thing they were missing is community partnerships.
Community partnerships. Okay. Sports tourism. Mark is heading up the recovery team that we have assembled, and he's going to give you an update on that. Mark?
Sure. Pleasure. Counselors, Mayor, working closely with Matt and also Phil and the emergency management team. It's encouraging to start talking about not just response to what we're doing, with the pandemic, but, talking about relief and restoration, right? I mean, our community has been resilient, and I think we're very proud of how our community has responded to this situation. But even past resiliency, I think having a plan in place as it relates to how we're going to restore that to a sense of normalcy as best as we can, with the restrictions that might be put on by the state and by, just social distancing and that sort of thing, and slowly moving into a plan that allows us hopefully to help our citizens of Auburn. So we have a great group that has been put together with the city that is comprised of economic development individuals, our public safety individuals, communication, marketing. And we had our first meeting yesterday in regards to talking about recovery. And we addressed kind of four things. I put together an outline, then shared with the group that we're going to fine tune a little bit as it relates to recovery. And mainly that outline has come up with some objectives and looking at recovery in kind of three phases, so to speak. Short term, what do we need to do right away to get back to business here in Auburn? And you know what? Recovery is not just about business and it's about our citizens, but it's also about our social well-being. There's going to be a lot of psychological effects as it relates to the pandemic, some psychosocial effects. And how do we kind of start addressing those kind of issues that are going to be coming down the pipeline as we hopefully get back to a sense of normalcy here in Auburn? So, it's important to start thinking about short-term stuff, immediate actions that we're going to need to take place once certain things get lifted from social distancing or allowing us to get back to a sense of normalcy. Intermediate concerns as it relates, to past the short term. How are we thinking weeks and months ahead? And then long term, how are we thinking past the months and into a year? And creating a plan that is a living document that we'll be able to use if an emergency situation comes, further down in years to come. And hopefully this plan allows us to be a stronger community and stronger and more prepared if something happens in the future. So that's kind of a guide, just a short, quick guideline of the outline that we prepared. And the second thing we talked about yesterday was how we're going to communicate this out to the public. And we need feedback from the public. We need feedback from businesses of how they've been impacted from this. We also need impact socially from the community and how they've been impacted by this, and taking that information and incorporating it into the plan. We have things that are on top of our head about what we want in the plan, but it doesn't make sense if we don't have any input from the community and businesses and people who live in our community. So we talked about a survey, and we're going to be going through those fine-tuned details of how we're going to get that out. And actually, Rosemary Mosier also got us connected with a Esri disaster response program that we'll be able to create a website, so to speak, a link that will have all this information so that community members will be able to go to if they have questions on maybe what we're going to be providing, if we have some funds available to provide some resources and some support to small businesses, but also what's going on nationally, any federal funds, any grants that might be out there for small businesses and community, counseling. So there's a lot of different things that this is going to be a great tool for us that allows people a dedicated site that allows them to go get some recovery information of where they need to go and how to get it. And if they have questions, they can reach out to us and ask those questions, which will be very important. And lastly, we talked about we started fine tuning and trying to say, what are the details that need to get into this plan? And we're going to not just work with department directors, but we're going to work with staff and get feedback from them. that was just kind of through the first meeting. We kind of covered a lot, and the next steps, is we're going to be formulating the surveys. We're going to be fine tuning the outline. And as we fine tune those, I will be glad to give you updates on where that sits.
A nice summary, Mark. One more thing that I think should be mentioned. The mayor had talked with me about the idea of putting some ideas together for the congressional delegation, Senator Collins, Senator King, and a congressman regarding things that we could utilize federal funding for. So we've got a number of ideas that have come from various people on the Auburn team, and we're working on that. Do you want to comment on that a little bit, Mark?
Yeah, Peter was right. The mayor is, talking with, people that all the people that might be able to help us outside our boundaries of the state. And we have put together a lot of feedback from different department heads and certain things that we might be able to put in paper just to make the ask and just say, hey, look, here's everything that we think that is important to our COVID recovery process. We're creating a memo around that and going to supply it to the mayor. So if he has some ammunition when he's talking to anyone whom he might be talking to about maybe finding us some additional funding resources in order to help combat this pandemic and get us on the road to recovery.
Very good. Any questions or comments for Mark? Council Lasagna.
Thank you. This is great. It's so great to be forward thinking. And I'm really proud of what Auburn is doing. I just had a couple of questions. In terms of the group that you've pulled together, is there, I don't recall, maybe you said this, is there somebody representing the school teachers or on the recovery group?
We are working on adding them to the recovery group. At this point, we're just looking at finding the right individual, but they weren't part of the meeting, but they will be part of the process.
Okay, and then
it's very important. It's very important because they've been affected. They haven't been in school since March. How is this going to affect them as they move forward and try to prepare for next fall?
Yeah, you could even think about guidance counselors and school nurses, not just the educators. And then the other thing is, you were really smart to mention sort of the social psychological aspect of this. It might be good to have somebody representative from whether it's Tri-County Mental Health or a school psychologist or somebody like that to understand what the transition means in ways outside of just sort of financial. Not that that's just what you're focusing on. I know in Germany they have a philosopher on their group. I know we probably can't do that here, but I just think it's interesting to make sure we're looking at sort of all aspects of people and what it's going to mean to them. But I really appreciate the work that you all are doing.
I took philosophy 101 in my freshman year at
Bring it on.
My minor was psychology in college. So just a quick response. I see Councilor Boss also has a question, but just in regards to the schools, I have talked to the superintendent about being on the recovery team, and for the time being, she's going to be on it along with Michelle, the deputy superintendent or assistant superintendent. But your point's a good one. Councilor Boss.
Thank you. My question was if the library is also going to have representation on that group, considering that they're also a large component of our community outreach and engagement.
They have not. It maybe wasn't part of that, but it's not something that it doesn't mean that we can't expand the group.
Great.
The group, we're trying to keep it manageable too at the same time. But we're trying to keep top of mind that it's not just that group that's going to be part of the recovery. We are going to be reaching out to these individuals to help us with the recovery. So it's she wasn't part of the initial meeting, but she's definitely going to be part of the fact from the communication phase of it.
Great. I had a quick second question just to ask if that survey will come before the council for us to review before it's disseminated to the public.
We haven't gotten that far from a standpoint of how we're going to get it out to the public yet. So we will definitely try to make sure you're involved in the input of that.
Thank you. Thanks for your presentation.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? Yes, Councilor Gary.
When you said you had a meeting, who was present at that meeting?
It was our recovery team.
Who's on the recovery team?
Okay, so the recovery team involves, let me get the list out front of myself right now.
It's staff from various departments.
Yes, it's staff. It's all departments. So, like for example, we have someone from public safety, which is Mr. Tim Kugel. We also have, I'm just going through the list of everyone that was on the call. Eric Cousins from Economic Development, Zach Lenhart from Economic Development, Liz Allen, Rosemary Mosier, who are helping from a communications piece, and Rosemary is going to help from an Esri piece.
Kelsey Earl.
Reagan Young from our internship program. She's helping out with a lot of research for us. And then Peter was on the call. Paul was on. Phil Kroll was on the call. Jeremy Gackham from Recreation Department. School Department's going to be involved, and I think that's about it. So it's about 7 to 8 individuals.
And the idea is to, as you've already indicated, is to bring people in when we need someone with certain expertise.
Correct.
Have a conversation with them, talk to them, get them involved. And
Correct.
Mark will be giving a more detailed report as we move along. He has done a nice outline in terms of what the goals and objectives are. It's not complete yet. It will be soon. We'll share that with you, and we'll provide you updates as we go along.
Again, we just met for the first time yesterday, so it's
Right.
digesting and diving into it all at once yesterday. But we thought it'd be helpful just to share to the group of the process that we're going through and what's on the table.
And Phil and I are very encouraged about it. There's a lot of energy, a lot of enthusiasm, a lot of good thinking.
Well, again, I think it's, we talked as a group yesterday about it's encouraging to start talking about going past response and start thinking about relief, and start thinking about how we might be able to have an impact to those people who have been so resilient in our community and battling through this. There's been a lot of small businesses that have been affected by this. Families have been affected by this. Different demographics, everything from the young kids who don't understand how come baseball's canceled, right? To even senior citizens who are used to congregating in certain places and they can't. My dad's asking me, how come I can't go get a haircut? And I'm like, well, I got clippers. I can shave your head, Dad, but he doesn't want that to happen. But there's a lot of people that are still very unsure about this. And I think if we do our job right with recovery, we're able to set them at ease a little bit, let them come back into the community, give a sense of normalcy. Recreation is going to be a big part of that. Hopefully summer camp, we can still run summer camp, and it's looking like it's going to be a positive thing because as restrictions go away, we'll be able to have summer camp. That's going to be a great piece for the kids who have been, who school's been canceled. They can't connect with friends. They don't have baseball right now. They don't have their typical leagues that they're playing in right now. And a lot of them are just like, they want to start doing things again. So there's a lot of bits and pieces to this recovery that, hopefully as things, alleviate and we're able to get more and more people out in the community, that we have a plan for that. And we also have an outlet for them to find out where those things are. And then there's resources for them. And that's what we're hoping to provide as a city.
And maybe just to expand a little bit on what Mark just said about summer camp. Staff is currently running numbers looking at what this might look like if we could start this earlier.
Right.
Than what we normally do, so that that'll also allow our citizens to be able to get back to work, right? Because there's going to be this gap where they thought their children were going to be in school, and now they still have them home. If we can do this, and it's along the CDC guidelines, can we get them into a summer rec program early? We've had conversations, starting to have conversations about even bringing in ed techs that might be able to help with taking a education component to this, so that way we can help with ensuring that our young people aren't losing anything throughout the summer, especially during this time that they've been away out of school as well. So there's a lot going into that planning for the school, and we're also running numbers as far as scholarships, so we can make sure we can reach as many as we can with hopefully some COVID recovery money that we can bring in for that.
Thank you, Phil. Great addition. Thank you.
One question, please.
Yes.
I keep going for the wrong mouse. You talk about the rec department, you talk about the school. What about the Boys and Girls Club as well as the PAL? How are they going to play a part in this?
They're all there. Those were just examples. It's not, this is, those were just small examples to show the recovery plan is more robust as it relates to trying to affect the whole community. That's why we have so many different people on the recovery team, so that we're trying to do our best to affect the most people that we can with the recovery process. And those were just specific examples. That's why also the survey to the community is going to be very important, and getting feedback of what was the most if you were a business, what were the three things that most affected you through this pandemic over the past 2 months? It's important for us to know. When we do a community survey, what has most impacted you? Is it your unemployment? Is it the fact that you were, out of work and you couldn't get your children to daycare? There's a lot of different things that are going to be going through this process. Those were just kind of examples that we brought up that are going to be part of the plan. But it's, we're expecting to have the plan to be as robust as possible and be able to affect as many people as possible. That includes PAL, that includes our seniors, that includes everyone that lives in our community.
Thank you.
You got it.
Council Lasagna. And then
I think Mr. Cole mentioned this, but it will be based on state and Maine CDC guidelines, correct? We'll be following those as.
Yeah.
Yes.
As much as
we can.
Right. 100%. And that's why, having a close relationship with Matt about everything that's going on from a standpoint of what might be, lifted from guideline standpoint, getting feedback from the state in general about what they're trying to do to get back to business. Those are all the resources that we're trying to follow to make sure that we're on top of it, to make sure that we can open as soon as possible. So yes, it's all restricted. It's all working within those guidelines, because we really can't go above those guidelines to try to do things. We want to be safe at the same time.
Council McLeod, you had a question, I think.
Thank you. Yeah, it's kind of to piggyback off what Councilor Boss said about bringing the surveys back to the council. Is the council going to be represented at all in the recovery efforts to help kind of guide some of the direction on where we want the city to end up? As part of the policymakers of the city, it would seem fitting to have at least some of us, or at least part of the ideas, push forward, because that's how we want the city to grow and expand. Everything you've talked about has already been phenomenal. As you said, it's the first meeting, but as we get further into it, to make sure that we're not running down like the wrong road on certain items or certain areas. That's all. That's why I think the updates to you guys are going to be important. That's why, again, I wish I had more detailed information to kind of show, or kind of have for you, but it's really, that's why I think the updates are not just updates. They're just to make sure that you're included in the process.
If I could just on this part, I think to piggyback off what Councilor McLeod just said, allow this process to continue. Obviously, Mark, great job so far, along with the rest of the team, and Phil. Let's keep this moving. Let's have a little bit more of an update on the 27th as we can, or if we can. But we're also moving towards this date of May 4th. And it's important to have a deadline or target, goal, aspiration, if you would. May 4th is a good aspiration. We're all hoping that normalcy can start that first week in May. So let's let it keep on working. Obviously, if there's any ideas that anybody has, please funnel them through the city manager or his designated point of contact. I've got a couple ideas, listening to this as well, and I'll keep funneling them through, and I think they'll sort out in the next week or so.
Yes, and appreciate the comments, Mayor. Please, let me know or Phil know if you have any ideas or thoughts, but we'll keep you updated and report back on what we're doing.
Again, the whole process, we really want, unfortunately, we have to live in a world where we need to be prepared, right? This might not be an isolated incident where this could happen in the future. And I think, I think many kudos goes to our, emergency response group, with Matt and our chiefs And I think we were very well prepared for this. And I think the community was, and I think our staff was, and I think this is just one part of the process to continue making us stronger as a city, is the fact that I really hope this plan allows us to be more prepared if something like this happens. And especially if we go through this process, get the feedback from the community, get the feedback from you, we will be.
Very good. Any other questions, comments? Thank you, Mark.
You got it.
Great job.
My pleasure.
We'll keep it going. Council Boss.
I have a quick question so the intention is to have the city council be in person on May 4th. Is that correct? Starting May 4th
Yeah.
for council meetings.
That's the concept.
The
Obviously.
concept. So
Yeah.
in this concept, can we create flexibility for those of us who are not yet comfortable attending in person due to higher risk? So for example, my mom was just hospitalized for cardiovascular disease. She's in a 14-day isolation period, and then she's coming to my house. So I don't feel comfortable coming to a meeting with the public if I'm going to just create that risk for her. So it's not just about us as individuals. It's about us and our impact on everyone around us. And I'd like to see a little flexibility built into that process where possible.
I think we need to have flexibility. I have one kidney. I fell off a ladder when I was 9 years old. I actually died in the emergency room, and they brought me back to life. So everything I'm reading about COVID-19 indicates that one of the organs that gets attacked is kidneys. So I appreciate what you're saying and where you're coming from. I know the mayor does too, and Phil does. So,
well, let's talk about that, Katie. I mean, we've already been talking, Phil and I, about, how do we socially distance? How do we maintain less than 10 people in the room? How is public participation still remote? Yet counselors are in a large circle encompassing the entire floor, for example. And if that means tech, so let's look at it. I'd like to talk about it more on the 27th, but duly noted, we've been thinking about that too, because some of you might not want to come in. So do we get an LCD monitor with your face on it directly, at the DS or at a surrounding table? It's like Max Headroom. We'll call you Counselor Headroom.
I hope the answer is yes to that.
we'll figure it out. We'll figure it out.
But yeah, I mean, there should be no undue pressure there. But it is an aspirational date, and I think that's really important because it shows that we're moving towards a normalcy yet to be determined on a timeline. So,
Okay. Everyone needs to be comfortable with what we're doing. Mayor, councilors, I think that's it for the COVID-19 update.
So we're going to start in the workshop on our city council budget. Very quickly on this is just designed to give us a chance to hear from the city manager about any updates he might have, any other figures, facts, and then moving in by department, looking at the operational budget as well as the CIP. We're not going to go line item by line item. I'm going to ask, is there any questions? Specifically, I have it written down. I'm going to ask if there's any questions on the operation budget for the clerk's office. Any subtractions that people think might be necessary? Any additions that counselors might think is warranted and where? And does the budget in this department, does it match up with our top 4 priorities in the strategic plan? And does it help push forward the council prerogative of a commercially viable downtown? Very simple. Nods, yeses, questions, a little bit of debate, not really looking for votes or consensus building at this point. Just a matter of really the department heads and city management having the ability to listen and understand and prepare for what we're saying at this point. So it's kind of a two-way street, if you would. So with that said, I'm going to turn over to the city manager if he has any updates that he might like to provide to us at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, councilors. Liz, I think you or Kelsey have a screen that you're going to show, a slide. Just one slide. The next one. Okay. Gotta love technology, right? So I have indicated that I would be coming to you on the 27th with a final proposed budget that will get to zero on the city side. And I'm going to talk tonight about what I've been discussing with the department directors. And what I'm planning on doing is taking out the 60,000 that I had put in as a placeholder for the professional fundraiser for the new high school. My thought on that, and I've talked with the superintendent about that as well, so she's aware of it, is that you can revisit that in FY22. I think it's something that probably does need to be done at some point in time. I think the timing probably is not correct to do it now. I've been involved in the school building committee since I was city manager. I have attended meetings on fundraising, as some of you have, and I know that we need some professional help there, but I think now is not the time to do that. The other thing that I would suggest, and I'm going to recommend, is to delay the hiring of the deputy finance director. And Phil and I have talked extensively with the finance director about that, so that will get us to zero increase, including 9.5 million that has been proposed for the CIP. So you can have a CIP of 9.5 million and still be able to get to zero on the city budget. And then in terms of the school department, I understand the directive from the school committee to the superintendent is get to zero. And in communicating, talking with the superintendent of schools, I know she's working to do that. And then in terms of intergovernmental services, there is a potential to get to zero on intergovernmental with the federal funding that has been received by the Lewis and Auburn Transit Committee, which you'll hear more about. They have provided 2.5 million approximately to the LATC. I think that puts us in a position to be able to get to zero on intergovernmental by not only helping with the LATC budget, but also the county tax increase, which is 147,000. We can talk more about that in detail. And Council McLeod is familiar with this. The mayor also has an understanding of it, and we can talk more about that on Monday. And then again, with CIP, we can keep the CIP at 9.5 million, and that would give us a zero tax increase for FY21. That's been a lot of, I think, hard work by everybody involved. You've participated in all the presentations that have been held by the department directors. People have worked hard to try to get to this point. I think you should feel good about being able to get to zero in the time that we're in. I would just say that as a city manager, I understand the situation today. I think we need to try and have a budget that has no fiscal impact on the taxpayers. At the same time, we have to think ahead as well to the next budget and the ones after that. But FY22, for example, if the money on the county tax increase is taken care of by the federal funding that we're getting for the LATC, you still have a cost of 147,000 that would have to be put in the budget in FY22. We can talk more about that on Monday, but there are decisions that get made that may have consequences in the future, and you just need to be aware of that. And we'll make sure that you are and answer any questions that you might have. But the bottom line is we can get to zero after a lot of hard work by everybody, including yourselves. And I look forward to hearing what you have to say tonight. And I want to thank you for the involvement that you've had and the role that you're playing. That's it, Mayor, councilors. I don't know if there are any questions anyone has. Councilor Gary?
Thank you, Mr. Manager. This is tough. Well, for me, it's tough for all of us. We are trying hard to do what we can for our city. But given that with so many unknowns about all the businesses that Auburn's losing and all the people that have been out of work, I'm not comfortable at just hitting zero. I don't mean any disrespect to anybody. I know
No,
they.
no, Councilor Gary, let's, the hallmark of good fiscal leadership in times like this is looking at the, really the justification of each item. Okay, so if we look at that, instead of just gearing towards a general decrease, we'll see what happens.
The thing of it is, in any good home budget, you have to look at what you're doing today, what's happening in this budget, how much, I mean, in the current budget we're living in, how much money is going to be saved from all the cuts that and freezes and everything that we've done. So we'll know how much less needs to be taken. So we're in better fiscal position. With this budget, yes, I understand that the taxpayers paid in their taxes in the appropriate time. So we've got money to fund this budget. We don't know what's going to happen when people have to go pay the other start of the next fiscal year's taxes, if they're going to be able to pay them on time and in full, same as with the businesses that we've lost. I know our economic development team is working their heart out to try to bring businesses in to grow our economy and a financial stability. But we have to have some sort of contingency on filling the gap that our finances may be in. Also, if we can keep the budget we're working in lower than what's being proposed, as well as not bonding as much, even though I know we can bond lots of millions of dollars, but that's not fiscal responsible. I'd rather see us take a cut in our CIP funding in order to use whatever $2 million and use that money as needed to help give our economy a boost in their arm.
Okay, so we're going to go through it by department now, and let's add everything all up at the end. I think that's just something, that we can start talking about. I'm going to try to keep notes and keep moving this along. Peter, Phil, Kelsey, I might need some help on that too. If you kind of sense some, some sort of agreement on things, if that could help.
Yeah, that's fine. We'll keep track of notes. Just a quick comment, and I don't mean to get into any kind of a counterpoint thing here, but just educationally on the CIP. With the CIP, we budgeted for the debt service for that 9.5 million. On the CIP, the 9.5 million doesn't equate to 9.5 million savings for taxpayers. There's a debt service of 200, 300,000 in order to pay for that 9.5 million that has been put in the budget for the city to be able to continue to do what it's doing so that we're structurally sound and capable of being able to provide services we provide. Thank you very much.
Okay, we're going to open up to the clerk's budget. I set the agenda out. We're going to start off with clerk, move to city manager. Right now, is there any questions regarding the operation budget for the city clerk's office? Looking around, nothing. Do I have any questions? Oh, Councilor Walker.
Yeah, I'm still worried about the amount of money she has in there that she's reduced, because especially with we're going to be doing all kinds of new things in June, and I'm worried that she, unless some place there's some money that's set aside, but I'm worried that she may have cut it down too much, because you might have to space people out. That means you do need as many clerks or more than what we've used in the past. And I'm worried about that. And I brought it up the first time around.
Mr. Manager, do you have any questions upon that? Or I'm not sure if Sue's on. Yeah, Sue is on.
Yeah, Sue is on, but I think, let me try to see if I can understand you better, Councilor Walker. Are you thinking in terms of the election process? Because I think she's adequately staffed. Is it the election process you're thinking of specifically?
Yeah. If I was listening to what Phil said, that we may have to, put people in different places, spread people out, go in and out different doors. You can't like Sherwood Heights, for instance. One person can't watch two different exits if you've got exits and entrances and whatever. I'm worried that she's not going to have enough money to staff everybody she needs.
I appreciate the concern. We've talked through this as we put the budget together, and we had a meeting today of the department directors, as a matter of fact. Phil, I think you would agree with me that we're adequately staffed with what we're trying to do with the transition plan and going forward.
Yes, I believe so. And keep in mind as well is that we will be applying for every bit of COVID relief money as we can. These changes will be as a direct result of COVID, which means that we can submit for reimbursement for these costs. So,
Right.
So we are noting those, or we're listing all our expenses out that way, so that way they will be able to recover those funds.
Councilor McLeod?
I just had a quick question. If it turns out that we're going to be doing a lot of absentee ballots, is that enough to fund postage, printing, and all that stuff? If there were an increased amount of people voting and requesting absentee ballots, so they don't have to go to the polls, which would kind of alleviate what Councilor Walker is saying as well.
I've talked with Sue about that. Let me talk to her again before Monday to give you a more firm answer on that. I think we're okay with that, but I'll talk with her about that.
Thank you.
And the reality is we can use fund balance a little bit in preparation for any federal or state reimbursement for escalated election costs due to COVID-19.
Right.
Okay, I think we're only talking a few thousand. Councilor Miltz?
We are.
Question, it's not just for this department, but it's going to be for all. And I've asked this before. We don't have what the salaries were last year versus what the salaries are this year. This particular department represents an 8% increase in salary. And given the state of the economy, I know businesses everywhere are cutting salaries. Do we want to, this is a question for all the departments where necessary. Are we considering a freeze in salaries?
Well, let me answer that in two ways here. First, you asked about getting the information on the salaries from last year. We can provide that. I know we've talked to Jill about that. Keep in mind with the city clerk's office, and we've talked about this during the budget process, but we had a compensation study that we did 2 years ago, and we're implementing that in phases. And one of the departments that was affected is the city clerk's office. So part of the increase that you're seeing is as a result of the comp study. And the other part of it is cost of living. In terms of a freeze, one of the issues that I deal with as city manager is we have 5 unions in the city, and then we have employees that are not in unions, non-union folks and management folks. From my perspective, I want us to be equitable to the folks that are non-unions as well as the management folks who do not have unions to protect them or bargaining agreements. It would be very challenging, very difficult to be able to change the agreements that we have with the unions. And I wouldn't want to do something with the non-union management folks that's different than what we're doing with the union folks. I just think that that's important. What we do need to do going forward is make sure that as we move forward, that the increases that we bring to you with these bargaining agreements and for the employees are reasonable. And we've already started some of those discussions. Phil, you're the management representative, the labor negotiator for the city. I don't know if there's anything that you want to add.
I would just say, we are communicating with our labor representatives through this. And as a reminder for new counselors too, the salaries that you see in there are what have already been negotiated. And there's nothing in there that is that has not been negotiated or we might be anticipating. So there are no COLA increases in there that haven't already been negotiated and agreed upon in the current contract.
Right.
And I respect everything that you guys are saying, and I understand. And I just want to make sure that we understand it's very difficult for the private sector that are the people paying the bills for this budget when they look and their salaries are being cut and the government workers who they're paying for are getting salary increases. And I think given in this market, we've got to think seriously about how we're going, if that's something that we're willing to do going forward. And I understand what you're saying, and I realize if union's union, that's one thing. That's a contract. There's probably nothing we can do about that, but you know, there's a lot of people who would like to be getting a COLA increase that are unemployed.
But if I could please, and Councilor Brooks, thank you for that. It's a good sentiment, and it needs to be addressed at a latter council meeting too. I think in order to address it, you furloughed some employees already this fiscal year 20. Could you give us a projection next week when you present your budget on how much revenue and payroll will be saved by the city? Again, it's like horseshoes and hand grenades. It's going to be rough because we don't know when we're going to unfurlough those individuals, but I think you can probably get a sense and be a little conservative so we can understand what the financial implications is to this fiscal year and where that savings will be applied, or where you're recommending that savings be applied if someplace else other than the fund balance.
Well, we will do that. We'll give you an update on that. I don't know how complete it can be, but we'll give you an update. There are 41 employees that were furloughed that are seasonal and temporary employees. And we can
just get that data. I think that'll help shape the follow-up conversation to Councilor Milk's question. Is there any other questions about operations on Clerk's office? I have one. I'd like to bring it up to the council. It's minimal. It's just about organization. We have the storage trailer for records, election records, under operations, $6,000. It's a tangible item. Historically tangible items go into CIP. And I'm just wondering if there's a reason for that not going into the CIP.
Yes. The reason for that is because that's an ongoing cost that we find ourselves facing. And the problem that we have, the system that we're using now is not working.
Is this a rental of a trailer annually, or is this a purchase of a trailer to be used?
This is a purchase of a trailer so that we can take better care of the election records. Sue spoke about it during her budget presentation.
Yeah. But a trailer in any other department would be bonded versus paid for an operational budget.
Well, the difference on this too is that we, talking with Jill on this, we try to bond anything that's greater than $10,000, not less than 10. And this is for the election supplies, so stanchions, those kind of things, not the records of elections, but just.
So it's simply because of the dollar amount of the overall purchase.
Dollar amount would push it into operational.
Very good.
And it's an ongoing cost as well, a recurring cost.
$6,000 a year is going to be recurring cost?
No, but the activity that we're involved in is a recurring cost. So we're trying to do a better job in terms of what's being done.
Got it. Okay. That was it really for operations, and CIP was nothing. So except for record restoration at 20,000, was there any comment on that?
I have a question about the trailer. Is that something that we would need in regards to our COVID recovery to now keep that stuff separate and allow us to have our elections as planned?
Every purchase that we have is going through our COVID recovery, not recovery, but our COVID team, which consists of Rita Beaudry, who's within our police department, who does a lot with grants and federal grants and reporting, as well as Derek. So every expense is being looked at to see if it meets straight face standard on whether or not that can be applied or not. So this would go through the same process.
Perfect. Thank you. So we might be able to get that reimbursed through some federal money at some point.
We're looking at everything.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Okay. So I will ask, is there any clerk? I always like to start off with clerk because it's pretty cut and dry and it's covered under statute. But is there any additions that anybody would like to see to the clerk's budget or CIP? Not seeing any. We're going to move on then. Next is the city manager's budget. Do I have any questions on operational side of this budget? If not questions, subtractions, or additions? Councilor McLeod.
I know the city manager spoke about removing the school fundraising consultant. If possible, I would like to see the addition of a grant writer for the city to oversee all the grants that the departments can possibly get to help. I think that would pay for itself. I don't know how much grant writer costs though. But for additions, that's what I would like to see in there.
Well, I'll ask Councilor Lasagna, Councilor Boss, what do you think?
Well, I think you can pay a grant writer per grant. You subcontract with them as needed. So
It's like a draw against commission?
it all depends. Different grant writers do it differently. So I think we don't need to have it as a paid position at this point. I think you can call somebody in and have them, and I actually gave a name to the city to have them just discuss, sort of looking forward what they can do. So again, I don't think it needs to be a staff position.
So it's like a per diem per BDM or per project basis. Councilor Boss, any ideas on what that reserve amount might be in this budget for that position? If we did it on a pay per performance basis or pay per contract?
It's a good question. I think we should look at the number of grants that are available that we'd be eligible for, that we'd be interested in. We could easily do a quick look and come up with a figure that's reasonable.
Well, I do know the recovery team's looking at that now. They said that during their presentation.
Great.
So,
That'd be nice to hear from them what they think.
okay, because there's a lot. It's almost, I mean, just on the opportunity zone, I think there was 215 potential grants.
Mm-hmm.
So that's just on the opportunity zone, pulled in from a lot of different federal agencies. So how about this? Let's put on that. If everybody's in a kind of agreement, let's put a question mark on that subtraction from the budget as a potential addition, not to exceed $60,000.
Mm-hmm.
Fair? Okay. And let's determine, based upon some feedback, Peter and Phil, from Mark and the team, on kind of some thoughts on that, if we could, some guidance.
You can also get in touch with a potential grant writer and just have them give you some ideas without having to necessarily pay them for it.
Okay.
Just to comment on this, when I was a county manager in Cumberland County, we actually had a position that was a grant writer special projects coordinator. The position can't pay for itself, but we also had a relationship with a firm in Washington, D.C. to help us with these grants. So, for example, we wanted to get funding for the jail. So we worked with this firm called the Ferguson Group, and they worked with the federal agency in Washington, D.C. to help us walk through what the requirements were. We were successful in getting the grant, but it's really takes a lot of expertise in order to be able to do it. I certainly think it's a good future goal for the city, and maybe a good way to start would be a consultant to help assist the city.
I'd probably pretty much scream and yell about a consultant. I know I used to be one for 15 years. But before we get into the city admin and city staff's thoughts on this, I'd like to keep this centered around council thoughts, with all due respect, and let's get that policy-making juices flowing, if we could.
It could also be somebody who works for the school department. Again, be consulting for the school department. Often grant writers, good ones, can write a grant for anything.
They can. Could be the library as well. And I know Mamie has some money set aside in her development director budget as well. There could be a lot of cross-pollination between quasi-municipal departments. And we can even write a grant for our new filtration system in the Auburn Water Department. So that's a good $35 million. So let's move on. City manager's budget. So we have that. Any other questions, thoughts, additions on operational side? Just speak right up. We can devoid the hand concept here. We're in workshop.
I would add just one note about the position for the library, to say that that's not just development, it's also engagement. So it would be hard to have the opportunity there is less for a quasi-municipal relationship building. If it were just a development coordinator, then I think there'd be more opportunity for cross-pollination, but that's a multi-purpose position.
Okay.
I know we had talked about this one of the previous workshops about the potential cost for community outreach, communications, branding, and economic development. And the proposed is $5,000, where the request was $30,000. Did we give any look into what something of that nature would actually cost?
I mean, I'll tell you right now that a decent election year communications budget to get our feet wet, without contracting out on a retainer, a public relations firm, will be around $30,000 to $35,000. It will be augmented by contributions on event-specific programs, i.e. New Year's Eve Auburn and parades and so forth. But 30 to 35 would be good. If you're looking at, and this is not a bad idea, frankly, to think about and talk about, the need for a part-time, a contracted out third-party public relations firm. I don't believe Auburn needs any more than 3 to 4 hours on average per week of public relations assistance, primarily with making sure that news stories are pitched to all the various news outlets, both state, local, and regional and national. That's really the legwork that a PR firm is paid for, and the relationships with those media outlets. If you throw that in there, that's probably another, I'd say, $20,000 a year for PR assistance on a super part-time basis. So to answer your question, Councilor McLeod, $30,000 would be a good media budget. $20,000 would be a good PR budget. The question I have, and I'd advocate for it, because there's no sense of having a communications department if you have no money to communicate with, is that money can come out of other than operation accounts, i.e. TIF. Because it is workforce development, and that is a absolute justifiable use of that money. The question is, where and how creative can we get in order to to apply this to workforce development from our other existing pots of revenue?
Semi-confused. When we talk about branding, I thought that was under Mark Goslin's budget. So are we going to do two different types of branding? And then I thought Liz Allen was the one that was pumping out all the general information and press releases.
When you pump it out, and she does a great job, the question is, do you pitch it? Okay. And what we found this is my personal experience over 12 years trying to work with press around the world. You have to call them. You have to really say, this is why this is so important. Read this press release, because they get a lot. And the relationships that are built, that's what's impactful. Okay. So it's about pushing out the data, pushing out the information, but also making sure people pick it up. And that earned media can be, look at what Sabrina did on Winterfest. I think it's always a great example. Low dollar event, few hundred participants, more. Don't take offense, Sabrina or Mark. But the press that we received because of those relationships was amazing. Every 45 minutes we were on TV for 10-minute live. It was an all-day, all-weekend event. That is incalculable how much revenue that our media is worth. So that's a difference between communicating and then making sure the communications are actually amplified. That's where public relations comes from. And when PR fails, you support it with paid media. You pay to get your message out. So it's any thoughts? We're talking right now of, if we're going to fund communication, I'd fund communication at 30. If you asked me off the street to give you my professional opinion, I'd say marketing budget at 30 and set aside $20,000 for public relations support. And that's a stretch, but that's what I'd recommend.
That's 50 total?
That'd be 50 total. But again, if you put off, $5,000 for some ad hoc public relations support, it's a nice toe in the water test. The caveat here is we're entering into an election year. You couldn't buy media if you wanted to between now and November. So it's going to be near impossible.
So I think 5,000 might. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, so you're saying, Mr. Mayor, to stick with the 5,000 that's in the budget currently?
No. Up it to 30 with a separate line item for public relations, PR, a third-party contracted firm, and they exist, in order to push your news stories out so you can get them picked up or have a higher degree of success.
I would want this to be much more closely considered both by the staff and the city before we make this proposal.
Okay. I can give you hundreds of case studies and invoices for public relation firms from the years. We can study it and we can bring in some other folks. Absolutely. But this is budget season. And I got to tell you, that's one of the reasons a media budget, I know this from just our last 2 years as being mayor of the Sesquicentennial. 30,000 is a bare bone media budget. 30,000 does not get you many impressions. But we can make it work if we're smart. You really can amplify it if you spend less on public relations in combination with your paid media. That's how you get the earned media too. So,
I just feel comfortable upping up from 5,000 to 30, at least 30,000 right now in this group making that decision. I don't feel comfortable doing that.
Well, we're not making any decisions. This is conversation. I will say I'll put together a proposal with a trusted media buying team and get you copies of all the proposals we've had and what they've purchased for the last 2 years that I've been partnered with the city of Auburn. It's not much.
Just a quick comment. There's 18,000 in the budget for communications, 13 that was transferred from economic community development, then the additional 5. So you've got 18.
Is there a possibility from to speak to what Councilor Gary was saying about the rec department? Is there room to get money from the rec department or some of the other departments to culminate into this pot for communications for the entire city, which would encompass the rec and other places? Or is this separate and by itself?
Well, we have a group that talks about communications, Mark Goslin, Liz, and other folks, and work together collaboratively on those things. What Mark is doing is he really is promoting the recreation and sports tourism department in the work that we're doing with the arena and the rec program and the Ingersoll turf facility. What Liz is doing is more communications internally and externally for the city. That's the way I think you should look at it and think about it. But we can certainly have more conversation about it.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
a few years ago, I think we were paying somebody approximately 160,000 to brand our city. You know, every year we were giving this money to a group that lived over on the other side of the river. We stopped doing that, and we were supposed to bring that back to ourselves here, and we were going to use that in the community development as well as within the city to brand this city and to move this city forward. Now, I don't know where all that money ended up being distributed or how we've split it up, but I do know that there should be some money there that we said we were going to use in our community development department that was supposed to figure out how to brand this city, whether it was to hire somebody or use that money. But we did do that, and I don't understand why we don't have a budget that it's at least $100,000 to be able to move the city in the right direction and brand it very well.
I'd like to see some of the TIF monies in the TIF account, which I know was a question asked what the balances were, to see if we could build up that 18 to 30 at a minimum.
We have that answer for you, and we'll provide that to you on Monday. So, and to answer your question, Councilor Walker, I think that money has gone into the Economic Community Development Department for economic development. It was to help us be able to do more economic development as a city, and I think we have been successful to a great extent in doing that.
Okay. Is there any other additions or subtractions on the city manager budget or review? I will say that I'm going to ask for $3,200 to be eliminated from dues and subscriptions. So it might not be in this one, Peter.
It's in the mayor council budget, I believe.
Okay, we'll get to it. Okay, fair enough. I couldn't remember if it was in this one or not. Is there anything else? First of all, does this budget? Councilor Boss.
Yes, thank you. The sustainability coordinator position was removed after review by the manager. I do know that we have a number of different staff people who are all have an eye towards sustainability in their regular work that they're doing in their own departments. But I do think that it shows commitment if we were to have a coordinator position that is really keeping this top of mind, has a portal and a dashboard that can show our goals and what we're doing to reach those goals for sustainability as a community. I think when we talk about being one of the best small cities in America, this is really an important piece of that vision, and having a coordinator would help us down that road. So I'd like to see that reinstated.
Well, I think we're talking about that. I mean, obviously, just as clarifying, we have to look for info for follow-up. If we want to do any additions formally, we bring that up. Either the manager can take some guidance now, and if he sees there's consensus, he can add it on his own volition, or we have to bring it up in a motion to amend in either the first or second reading of the budget. So just, so we can keep that just so everybody knows. Even when I'm asking about monies for media, there's, unless there's consensus right now, overwhelming, then it's just not going to be in there. So the practical point. Okay. Is there any other comment, about sustainability directors? And it's in here. It was department requested, then removed at 55,000. Counselor Gary?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I agree that it could possibly be needed, but given our trying to keep the budget within reason, not knowing the future and what's going to happen this fall, I don't want to see any more added people, because if we add it this year, then we're going to have to figure a way to fund it for next year. And if we can't, that poor person will lose their job. So at this point, I can't support it.
Just talk. No raising hands, please. I'm getting tired.
I certainly appreciate, the concern about having somebody have a job for a year and then not another year. I come from a background of working. I'm 100% grant funded, so I never know if I'm going to have a job or not, and I have to write my own grants for my own salary. So that makes it equally as, difficult. But I do think that there is cost savings to be had by having a real focus on sustainability. I think that if we were to do some digging on that, there are other municipalities that have really great programs, South Portland being one of them. They have a great website and a lot of information about the benefits that extend far beyond, saving a little bit of money here and there. They're looking really comprehensively across their community on ways that they can be more sustainable. And they have a very public interface that's really, I think, a model. And it'd be nice to show a little bit more outward facing efforts in this area.
How about this as a solution, kind of a middling solution here? Our recycling committee has been extended in their work. We do have an allied item today to talk about waste disposal in our workshop. Why don't we add, and we did ask the recycling committee to look at the waste disposal costs, if it's being effective, considering this time in our history with COVID-19. Why don't we have them also look at municipal examples, ROI examples for sustainability directors and report back to us?
We've been doing that. Actually, the committee has been doing that and does have some good information. And I'll defer a little bit to Assistant City Manager, but we could make a presentation about that. And when you're looking for support, Jason, Mr. Mayor, I agree with Councilor Boss that this is the kind of thing that does have ROI. And that we can certainly figure out and give a little more specific information about that. And it's also the kind of thing where this person could take on some of the responsibilities of some other people, particularly in Dan Goyette's operation, to be able to move that forward. But again, as Councilor Boss said, I think what it says about this community would be really impactful.
Well, that's good. Sustainability was not directly talked about. It was, if you would take natural resources on our strategic recommendations, it was low, third to last. So it's not in the top 3 or top 5 on our strategic plan initiative. So I'll throw that out there, but I think we should have the recycling committee look and try to sway us if need be. But it wasn't on the top 5.
I think there's overlap between sustainability and natural resource protection, but they're not equivalent necessarily.
Well, then maybe sustainability is overlapped with something else that might have been on the top 6 or 7. Protect Lake Auburn was low again, but there's already a group that does that. That's not even municipal, but a private group and funded. I would have to look a little bit deeper, but I'm not seeing sustainability in any of the top 3 or 4. And that's not an opinion. That's just the fact. So. Well, let's look at that. Does what we're spending money on match with our strategic planning initiative, as well as the council's focus on downtown commercial viability? So, but let's see what the recycling committee has to say. And if anybody on any of the councilors, Councilor Boss or Councilor Zania, do the research, dig it up, present it. I think those arguments should be made during readings to see if it could be added back in. The beauty about debate. So, anything else on the city manager's budget? Okay, Councilor Milks.
Small, but with the dues and subscriptions was $4,600 last year, and it's $6,100 this year. That's $1,500.
Is it MMA, Peter?
Yeah, it's the MMA. I want to look at it more closely to give you a good answer on that. But
and then is the travel mileage. So Is it 55 cents a mile for using your own car?
IRS standard.
Whatever the federal rate is.
Yeah, whatever the IRS rate is.
Just to go back on dues and subscriptions, we transferred the GIS coordinator into the city manager's budget. And so that dues and subscription
Yeah.
electric IT is now shifting.
Yeah, that's what that does. Thank you, Phil.
Gotcha.
Okay, we're going to move on to economic and community development at this time. Operations, we'll start off first. Is there any specific questions, subtractions, or additions onto the economic and community development budget?
I have a question about the administrative assistant being 50% TIF. Are there upper and lower limits on what that TIF money can be used for as for staffing?
What do you mean by upper and lower limits?
Is there a reason why it's only 50% from a TIF rather than 100%?
I think the way they arrive at that percentage is the amount of time that the person is working on projects that are related to the TIF funds.
Okay.
Anything else? And just speak right up. I'm looking along with you all. Okay. We'll just try to be polite with one another.
The neighborhood and service, I'm sorry what it's called, the neighborhood service coordinator. Can you talk a little bit about that position, only because I wonder if that position should also be participate in the transition group that Mark Goslin is talking about.
That's a possibility. That person is an individual is responsible largely for getting the senior center renovated. That's what that position is. Right now, Eric Cousins represents economic community development. Certainly, we could pull in that person for additional expertise if we need to. I mean, we've kind of designed the recovery team so we have a small group that can be mobile and adaptive and flexible, and then we pull in people as we need to. Is the concept behind it.
And if that position is about the senior center, aren't we well on our way to completing the senior center?
Well, that position is about a lot of different things, but that individual was responsible for overseeing the renovation that took place from the Economic Community Development Office with the CDBG funding.
Hey, Councilor Lozani, if you remember from last year when you served on the CAC, all the CAC or CDBG grants that are administered actually have people following up to make sure the vendors are doing it, they're certified, work's completed, money's distributed, project manager writ large. I think, I mean, if anything, maybe in the future, a little written description of some of these positions, because they're nuanced titles, might be applicable to future council budget deliberations.
Yeah, project manager is much easier to understand. Thank you.
Okay, is there any other line items and operations for econ development? I'm looking through my notes too.
Mr. Mayor, on the overtime account, 2 years ago, we hired a second electrician to help out the first one. And now we're going, into separate accounts and increasing them for overtime and everything. I would think having two men, we could run the electrical department at a tighter budget and not have to start putting every one of these line items higher to have a second electrician on hand.
Yeah, we did. That electrician, the only reason we approved it was because it was going to be a joint position, equally split or proportionally split with the school department.
Well, and that person is actually being paid in part by the school department. Keep in mind, and we talked about this during the budget presentation that Michael Chamings gave, with the city taking over the lights that CMP had. That has generated savings for the city, but it's also increased responsibility. We now have that responsibility in addition to the other work that we're doing. I think that Michael Chamings would argue that we need more electricians than what we have. I think the increase that you're seeing in the overtime is a result of the additional work that they're doing.
But have we seen, where are we accounting for the transfer of money for the school department for labor back to the city to help to compensate for that individual?
If I remember correctly, I think that and I'll check on this, but I think the school department has a line item in their budget to help pay for that position as well. I'll speak with the finance director about that and give you an answer on Monday.
Please do. I think one of the challenges that I know now, this is my third budget, is making sure that we have consistency of what is executed upon, the reason why from the previous year or years, and making sure that carries through. With 1,000 line items, it's difficult. There's no fault here for anyone. I just want to make sure that we're trying to be consistent.
Sure.
With past directive.
This might not be the right place to bring it up yet, but moving forward as we start to reopen Auburn, is there considerations to what you just said that we're splitting some positions between us and the school department? So if we need an electrician, we half hire them and school department picks up the other half, or facilities, or any of that other type of stuff to kind of share the load between the two of us?
That's the only
I know it's the
position we
same
have
pot
that's
of money,
happening.
but
I think that's the only position where we actually share costs. Now, we are working together in a lot of different ways, but we've already, since I've been city manager, and probably before that, but since I've been manager, we have continually looked at what we can do to try and have positions that can be shared between the school department and the city.
A
excellent.
good example of that, and this came up last budget, a scissor lift was in our CIP and was 20,000 or so, I can't remember. The school had one. During a council meeting, we brought up the fact that, can we borrow the schools? And we have. I don't see a scissor lift showing back up this year in our CIP, so it has to seem that I would assume that was a success. So yeah, let's keep thinking about ways that we can join forces and help each other out, because it is real dollar savings.
I had a quick question about the street lights and the traffic signal maintenance. Are we, because CMP, I can't remember exactly why we increased the cost so much of those. I mean, we went from $7,000 up to $18,000 for street lights, and from $10,000 to $30,000 for the traffic signals. Are we increasing the number that we're doing, or is that just part of scheduled replacement, and we're planning on doing that many more this year than we did last year?
I think it's all those things. Actually, I think that's a question that we have an answer for you that was raised earlier in a previous budget meeting. And on Monday, we'll provide that information. In fact, at the end of this meeting, we can show you some information on those questions that were asked previously and where to go on the city's website to get the answers.
Is there anything else on economic development operations side before we move on to CIP? No? Okay, let's move on to CIP now. Let me turn to CIP. Council, any comment on the econ development CIP? And just a FYI, make sure we're looking at, I actually just ripped it out. There's a section in there that just had department requests. I just got rid of it because the next section under CIP in your books is department requests, manager approval, and where the source of the revenues are coming from. Just a little cleaner. Rail study. I'll start off. Rail study. We have it down here. Managers recommended bonding for rail. I don't think it's the right time to be looking and throwing out $50,000 or potentially budgeting $50,000 for passenger rail between Portland and Auburn Lewiston at this time. Council, any thoughts on that?
I agree with that. I think we, first of all, everybody else needs to be doing their due diligence and moving this forward. And I think people are in a lot of different places. So I would agree with you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay.
Remove that.
No need right now.
Agreed.
Got it.
If it did freight and did a study, not quite that expensive to bring back to life the intermodal facility, I'd support that. But given it's not going to promote any real jobs, I'm not for it neither.
About a year and a half ago, there was a study conducted by Lewiston Auburn Railroad Company about freight increases. I believe the study is complete. We are waiting to get that information back to the council so we can look at that, and that might give us a little bit more direction on freight. I don't know if we'll get it before the end of this budget season, nor do I know if it actually means that we'd have to invest in anything at this point. So I was hoping to get it before now.
It would be great to bring back that foreign trade zone that we've had that's been kind of dormant.
Yeah, it's there. That foreign enterprise trade zone is still there, but it's about marketing, and there's a lot of other things, but that resource is there. Okay, so 50, we got a little consensus on rail.
I agree to move it, but Mr. Mayor, is there a place where counselors, new counselors can look at some of that information just so they know what the scope and of what was proposed in terms of that?
Yeah, I'd be great if actually the mayor and the old counselors could as well. We don't have anything other than it was conducted, it was paid for by DOT funds, and we're really we're waiting at this point. We're all waiting for everything.
Right. I just meant in terms of what came out of that study.
We don't know yet. We all want to know at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't heard it other than, yeah, it's done. That's it. That's as far as all my knowledge.
Right. That's what I'm asking about.
Yeah, I'm waiting. We're all waiting for it.
Okay.
Michael Chamings is involved with the Lewis and Auburn Railroad Company meetings. He helps staff them. I'll speak with Michael and see if there's an update on that. But as far as I know, I agree with the mayor. I don't think they have completed that work yet.
It's taken a while, but DOT paid for it.
I think Bob Stone was also on that, wasn't he?
That was Amtrak. Our representatives now are Dick Crafton, Jonathan Labonte. Maybe Bob Stone's still on that one too.
He was involved with a rail study of some sort.
Yeah, right. It was passenger rail. This is freight. This is the Lewis and Auburn Railroad Corp, which has been around since 1873, I believe.
Right.
It's an active. We're the only cities actually in Maine that own our own railroad. They generate revenue. They are doing well. I've asked Mr. Trafton and former Mayor Labonte to kind of put together an idea of the revenue streams that they have and how that can be used for economic development. They do make money, not a whole lot, but around 20 to 40,000 annually. So that is something that we all need to look at. So as soon as we're kind of through this part of the budget, we'll follow up with Peter. If you could follow up with Michael, let's see if they can get a workshop on that study and their finances, because the city does a third of it.
The next one, I have a question about the Great Falls Plaza Vision.
Yeah.
Funding.
Me too.
Yeah.
I think and we could talk more about it on Monday, but I think if you feel that you want to do something downtown and you'd like to do something with Great Falls and redevelopment of Great Falls, that money is there to work with Tom Platts, who's plays a major role in terms of what's happening there. And we've had conversations with him. In fact, he came in and did an executive session with the previous council that councilors may remember who were part of that. That's money to continue that discussion. And
what does the 200 grand get us?
Well, I think what it gets us is hopefully with him a true partnership so that we can develop a plan on how we would redevelop it.
So Councilor Zani, if I could, let's think about this not as money for Tom Platts, because at this point, unless someone has a plan and paper in front of me, I'm not inclined to support anything. I think we've all talked about that in general. Am I right on that, Council?
Mm-hmm.
Speculative, low, plan high. But what if we talked about this in our head as a placeholder for Auburn downtown commercially viable economic development? I just slaughtered that one. Yeah. But I know staff's working on that as part of recovery, and there might be a potential to leverage some monies from a source like this for something that is not in Great Falls, but yet still in our downtown.
So
I understand that. It just seems $200,000 seems like a lot of money to set aside for sort of if.
It's 100. Are you looking at the right?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, it's actually 100.
100 seems like a lot of money to set aside for what if. I mean, obviously you have some ideas about how it might be used, but
I guess, the only other thing, and I appreciate what the mayor said, but the only other thing is sometimes it's very hard just to get a developer interested in the city. In this case, we have a developer who lives in the city who wants to do something. So maybe you do earmark that money for downtown, and then if something happens with Great Falls, then that's fine. But we do have to be prepared in terms of what we do as a city. So
And there's ways we can. I think to Councilor Zani's point, we can bond more money at a later point in time. We've done it before. If there is a concrete plan on the table, we can issue a bond. I do like the idea, and I think you're going to hear about it in the next couple of weeks about how we kickstart that commercially viable downtown and what we're going to need for that. We'll keep that in the back of our minds that there is a need because development is difficult. So, but if the council, if we had to look at it and theoretically vote on something right now, I'd vote with Councilor Ozani and take it out. But Councilor Boss?
Yeah, I'm hoping for a little more clarification on what that $100,000 would specifically buy us. Is it paying for Tom Platts to do a site map? Is it paying for another specific service? I'm interested in what is $100,000 for.
It wasn't for any of those things. It was to jumpstart a catch basin rehabilitation in order to support any future development down there. But it's not needed to happen unless there's a plan for future development in that area.
Right.
Yeah, there's a storm drain issue there that would cost about $1 million to address. We need a plan before we're going to do that. So,
Is that part of the one that we ran into with the Bangor Savings Bank?
I believe so. Yes.
God knows what's buried under the city. Okay, so it sounds like general consensus is if we're going to have money, we better be allotted to a specific plan and less speculative. Okay, moving on. Is there anything else in economic development under CIP?
It's 4 items, correct?
I
Recommended bond.
will say I'd like, and it's probably in our packet, I'd like to have a little bit more information on downtown parking and walkability. Not now, but soon. I understand downtown parking was to support the library. This is TIF CDBG monies,
Right.
but I like to say, you can't have a walkable city unless you have a place to walk to and from. So when we're looking at the hierarchical need of capital and where does it go today in fiscal year 21 to supporting more growth and then building walkability or enhancing walkability because it exists, enhancing it to walk to the new locations that are there. So it's a chicken and the egg concept. I love walkability. I like to call it strollability. I want people to take nice strolls from point A to point B, but we got to have point A and we got to have point B.
Mr. Mayor, what CIP section are you looking at in the book? I just want to make sure I'm looking at the exact same spots.
Which 2021 only.
Okay.
Second section with the managers recommended as well as department recommended.
Thank you.
I was confused too. I got it now.
It may be easier if you look at the CIP summary. If you look at that CIP summary tab, everything that is being recommended is down to 2 sheets. The piece that the mayor just mentioned is on the second page, which is under the CIP other funds, which would be the TIF fund. And then there's also a page reference if you want to see more detail that's in your back of your book as far as the details.
Mm-hmm.
Any other comments?
I had one question about the, I know it's not recommended for the electrical vehicle replacement. Is that something that we can live without for a little while? Was that a want rather than a need?
Well, I'm not recommending that. So yes, I think we can live without it for a while.
I'm just making sure we're paying electrical people to work. I want to make sure they can work. All right, very good.
They're working.
Okay. I will say also as a follow-up, I think it's, we have $200,000 set aside and recommended for a public safety building. I'm not going to disagree with the need for a public safety building. It's overdue, but I'd like to be a little bit more realistic in the amount of money that it takes. And I know it does not take 200. If it does take $200,000, everybody in the city of Auburn needs to recall us.
Again, just a quick comment. That's a placeholder because of money that was in the CIP to do renovations, right? You're all aware of that. We chose not to do the renovations because we didn't want to spend that money and then come to you and say we need a new public safety building. We thought that was irresponsible. Derek Belanger has been looking into this since we had the last conversation about this topic. I got an email from him today, as a matter of fact. He's talking with Woodard and Curran. I sent a response back to him today to the effect that I just want to make sure that this this study completes the work that we need to do to be able to give a recommendation to the city council. What he's looking at right now would cost $100,000, not $200,000. So I would like to, and have a building committee that could be involved so that people from the community are involved in that process as well as city council.
Too much of an assumption of a yes on the building committee. When you form a building committee, you assume the policy direction is we're building a public safety building. If so far initial estimates are 100,000, which I think is my honest opinion, ludicrous. I'd like to see $100,000 set in there for the study under unallocated, and the additional $100,000 applied to other things that are going to be on the CIP budget for bonding, and then have it paid with unallocated monies. Does that make sense, Council? Thoughts? Yeah. Basically, set aside $100,000, make sure it's done. It should be more than enough. Take the other $100,000 and apply it to any type of improvements in facilities with regards to fire engine 4, the police department, body cams, and so forth. There's some things that unallocated can be allocated for within the initial bonded departments.
Be good with that.
Okay.
I think that sounds good, Mr. Mayor, but Derek should be able to come back and make sure that the 100,000 is enough for it. And if it isn't, he needs a little more. We've got that set in there. I think we want to make sure that we don't cut him short on the end, that he's making deals already.
Yeah, that's a good point, Councilor Walker. And it should be easy to
Yeah, it's a good point, but let's
get
hold
that
him down to
number.
100,000, folks.
Well,
Okay.
100,000 sounds good, but if he needs another 10 or 20, I would like us to be able to go to that money you're saying put aside and get it there.
I still think it's a little high, a lot high.
Hello.
Hello.
Yeah, I'm having a little faulty internet. I'm sorry, I missed that last point, Council Walker, but what was it? Are we in agreement to kind of keep it capped at 100 and redistribute 100?
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah. As long as the other 100, we could tap it for that if we needed a 10,000, for instance.
Okay. Okay. Again, just general guidance. So I'm taking notes on that one. That sounds like some direction. Is there anything else from economic development? I'm sorry. No. Yeah, we're on. Did we just skip over?
You jumped into facilities, it looks like.
Yeah, I did. My fault. I thought it was still in economic development. Okay, I just moved right down to facilities. So I'll take that out of context. Is there anything else in economic development before we move on to emergency reserve and the other items? I was on a roll. No? Okay. So next one is emergency reserves. Mr. Manager, do you want to start off? How much money is in the budget for emergency reserves?
The money that is being proposed is $461,230. Again, this is based on the charter, and there's a formula that determines what that amount is going to be. The emergency reserve fund shall be annually funded an amount equal to at least 0.5% of the total amount to be appropriated for all purchases of the current fiscal year.
So we have about $380,000 left in our emergency reserve fund for this year. We used $50,000 of it. What I'd like to propose is one of two things. Allocating that $380,000 towards either a direct property tax relief portion of direct property tax relief, with the other portion going to enhance our emergency reserve fund above the mandated minimum, or all of it going to the emergency reserve fund to enhance the mandated minimum 0.5%. The reason is, if rev sharing at the state level, to Councilor Gary's comment, is significantly lower than what we're forecasting, we'll have an emergency reserve fund of $840,000, $30,000 that we can use to offset and appropriate out for property tax relief in fiscal year 22.
Can this emergency reserve funding be used? Is it liquid? I know there's some,
No.
okay.
if the mayor is insistent on doing this, we need to do a little presentation for you.
Yeah, well, it's not the mayor's insistent. I'm just trying to have some good fiscal discipline. But again, council, before we get into the pros and the cons and staff versus elected officials, we're not changing the charter right now. This year's emergency reserve fund flows into fund balance. But legal opinion has been given that we can appropriate that money to something else.
No,
Yes, but
you need, I've consulted with the city attorney.
you sent it to me, and that's what I can read the recommendation.
No, I think Michael would not agree with that statement. So I think the best way to proceed is, if the council wants to entertain this idea, is to have a presentation on it. So you get the information and then you can decide what you'd like to do. But there are parameters that you've got to follow. You've got a charter that has specific language. You also have advice from our auditor, as well as our finance director and myself and the assistant city manager, that we'd like you to listen to as well. I appreciate what the mayor.
Again, we're having a discussion about this, but we're not actually voting on anything, Peter. We should. We welcome that, okay? And we welcome to present what council wrote. And I'll send it to all the councilors after this meeting. But we have to start looking at how that money's used. Here's a fundamental problem if we're having a little discussion on this. It's always supposed to be 0.5% of our budget, both school and municipal. And we always do it. And it always flows into the fund balance to keep building up the fund balance. The problem is our budgets keep increasing dramatically. And that the city manager sent out an email a couple of days ago showing what I think it was $22 million over the last 5 year combined increase, a significant percentage. We're constantly playing catch up. And at a certain point, we get more money from the state this year, automatically means we have to put in another 0.5% of the 900,000 additional we got from the state in road share. It's an extremely hard catch up. Next year, it might be less. We don't know. But the recommendations are simple. You can apply it for property tax relief. We're not talking about using the fund balance at all. We're talking about taking what's currently in the emergency reserve, adding it to what's going to be appropriate emergency reserve to bulk that up in case we need to use it without tapping into this fund balance. It's actually a fund balance protection measure. But I want you all to think about that. And this is the time to talk about that too, a little bit from a concept standpoint. We'll get into legal stuff during a good old-fashioned debate, probably on May 4th, frankly, because there is some problems and inconsistencies. So, but any thoughts on that?
So what you're saying is we take this year's remaining emergency reserve, and it goes into next year's budget.
Into next year's emergency reserve.
And so then it would be twice as much. So it'd be 800,000.
Exactly, 900 and change. Yes, high 8s, low 9s. Right. As a just in case, so we don't have to tap into the fund balance unless it's an absolute disaster. But that would be, assuming we did not get the 900,000 we got this year in state economic rev share. Okay, and they're forecasting it to be lower. Which is Peter's already taken that into account. So,
and we also use it if we don't get enough tax dollars in from businesses and property owners.
We could.
Again, I would suggest that we present the information to you. We could do it on the.
Have a conversation, Peter. We have to do that. It's a workshop.
No, I'm just saying. I think that would be the appropriate thing to do. And
yeah, I'd like to see a presentation. I guess the question I have is to find out what the benefits or the downfalls, excuse me, of not tapping into the fund balance itself, rather than having this money flow to the fund balance. In turn, then we take it out if we need it. What the actual ramifications are of doing it that way versus having it set slightly aside before it gets into the fund balance as a place that we can utilize it for emergencies. Just the difference and the rationale behind each one and what the potential outcomes would be 2 years from now if we did it one way or the other. Because I assume at some point our fund balance will be fully funded, at which point we can start giving tax relief back because we will have a giant pot of money that we have as a fund balance, hopefully. Unless I'm merely wrong.
We can answer those questions for you.
Thank you.
We'll make sure it's scheduled, but I'm glad we had this conversation because I want the council to start thinking about this. Okay.
Tax relief would be great.
Say again?
tax relief would be great.
It would be. Okay, so moving along for emergency reserve, nothing we really can do on that, but it's a good conversation. Facilities and finance. Start with finance first on the operational budget side of things. Is there any questions? And you heard what the city manager said about eliminating the deputy finance director position. That's 75.
Delaying it, Mayor.
Delaying it for a period of 1 year?
No, delaying the hiring until January or maybe fall. We'll see how the numbers go. It's going to take some time to get a deputy finance director on board.
So,
anyway,
are we there? Shoot.
So if we're delaying, does that mean we still need to budget some sort of money for this?
yes,
So like half of what you're saying is if it's 6 months into our fiscal year, we need half of what's listed here?
correct.
Okay.
Yep.
So it's safe to assume as a placeholder, you want half the 75?
Yes, if we hire the person in January.
Okay. Is there anything else with finance, folks?
Are you planning on using a recruiter for that?
We would do what we ordinarily do. We work with our human resources director, Chris Muma. She'll advertise it in the appropriate journals and in the appropriate places so that we get the best candidates that we can.
Nothing else on finance? So moving on to facilities, and again, I jumped the gun and I apologize. Council, do you have anything on the facilities portion of the CIP? Or operations?
This is not recreation and sports facilities, correct?
It could include them, like for example, security access control.
So if we can include them, is that appropriate?
If it falls under the finance aspect of it, yes. I mean, that's just so we can all follow along, Councilor Lasagna.
Right.
On facilities or on finance?
We
Or
are
facilities.
going to talk about the capital improvement items under recreation and sports tourism, if that's what you want to talk about specifically later on.
Later on.
Yeah.
So basically, how it comes up in our budget book. So we've got facilities, whatever it's under facilities, that's what we'll talk about. And then if it's not here, it's going to be under rec.
Yeah.
Was finance the department that was looking for an electric vehicle to replace the Hyundai Elantra?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, because there's a $1,500 placeholder for the repairs of that vehicle, while also asking for a new vehicle, right? So that would go away if a new vehicle were approved?
We're looking at that. That question came up earlier.
Okay, never mind then. Good.
Yeah.
Question I've got in facilities, under general, we've got fire extinguisher inspection and maintenance, HVAC maintenance contract. I assume that those types of things we go out to bid on a regular basis.
Yes.
Do we have to outsource the fire protection stuff, fire alarm testing, fire extinguisher inspection? Or can that be done in-house?
The fire chief can answer that question better than I can. Maybe Phil is aware of this, but we do what we can. I think the fire chief has said that as much during his presentation. Phil, do you have any more insight on that?
Yeah, we don't test extinguishers. That's not what the fire department does. So we do contract that out.
We also don't test the fire, all the water supplies that's sent to our sprinkler systems and stuff. We can't do that. That's all out.
Subject to regulation, I'm sure.
We do what we can.
E-codes. Our security. I'll throw it out there. I'm trying to find the exact one here.
Which one are you looking at, Mr. Mayor? What are you looking
Swipe cards. Swipe. Where is it? I'm looking at notes. I'm trying to find where it is here.
In recreation?
No. We're in facilities.
Page 22.
Thank you. Yeah, security access control. And it's recommended 150,000. Is that correct?
Yep.
Small. Yeah, security access control. And I understand the importance of it. I'm not going to argue that one. But I'm not sure if I would list it as a top priority. And if it was, I'd probably recommend certain buildings on a phased implementation.
I believe I think they including 3 in this one, but I think I think they could work with one year and another the next.
That is a phased approach, but certainly we could extend it out over a longer period of time. And we could provide you with more information on that.
Yeah, I agree with Councilor Walker to extend it out. One, because it'll allow you to see how it works in some of the facilities, just to make sure that it's appropriate.
Well, we're already using it in facilities now. This is just a continuation of expanding it. So we're already familiar with the program.
Okay, thank you.
So a little bit of consensus on trying to see if we can spread out that phased approach on a prioritization system, or even if there is currently a prioritization system, phase it out a little bit longer.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or at least see what that would look like based on the buildings, because it might not be a cost difference if we're, 2 of the big buildings bring it in very close. It might not matter on that phasing.
Let's study it a little bit more before we make a decision on that, if we could. Okay, Barry, is there anything else on facilities? I did mention the public facilities study. I'm not going to go into that again. Is there anything else? No? Okay, so we have facilities, operation and facilities CIP. I'm going to ask this. Do you think that the expenditures on facilities and operations and CIP match up with the priorities in our strategic plan? Do they contribute to the economic or commercial viability of our downtown?
I mean, this is where I get into some other things, for example, like tot lot. I know that, I don't know how that.
What's in the recreation?
That's on page 65. I'm sorry?
Are we still on facilities right now?
That's under recreation, Counselor.
So we'll just wait. I'll just wait till we get to
just to keep it simple, just facilities. Finance is finance, of course, but facilities. Does this marry up with trying with a strategic plan initiatives, the prioritization that we did, and with our vision for a commercially viable downtown? Yeah, you think? I could throw out the
Infrastructure
argument.
and public safety building was 3rd from the bottom.
Yes, public safety was 3rd from the bottom.
Just to acknowledge that.
I'm sorry.
But it's certainly on the list.
So yeah, it's on the list. Boys and Girls Club roof replacement should have been done last year. That's downtown. That's an absolute. That's a great example.
Right.
Rehabilitation of fire departments. It's on the list, but it's pretty low. But at least it's on the list.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Okay, let's move on to fire and EMS. Other than passing an ordinance outlawing fires, which I'm not sure is truly enforceable, do we have any questions on operation budget for fire and EMS?
I'm just looking at I guess we have to do the ambulance replacement, correct?
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Comes out of EMS reserves as well.
Yeah.
Just keep in mind that's been, that money goes in there so that we can pull it out for this.
Yeah. Thank you.
We had a lot of questions answered already by Chief last week when we met.
Mm-hmm.
Definitions of some of the small operational costs. We've already appropriated the additional $100,000 for the fire truck for the new replacement vehicle. So that's in here as well. That's good to go. We are pulling out the supervisor vehicle, correct? According to Chief, I'm not sure if that made it to the list here.
Not in here. He's gonna make do.
Okay, but is it, okay, so it's not in your budget at all, so we don't have to amend that. Okay, he's gonna make do, got it. Okay. Is there anything on fire EMS CIP? No? Okay, we'll move on. Obviously, this isn't the end all be all too. If we need to bring it up on our next meeting, if you guys have an epiphany, we can do that. Let's move into IT, operational. And if you notice, there's certain things we're just kind of skipping over, i.e. general assistance. And I did that based upon conversations that we had in previous workshops. There didn't seem to be anything high profile or controversial in some of these budgets. Fringe benefit, general assistance. So we just didn't.
The one comment for general assistance, and it doesn't affect our budget right now, is it's a bit of a concern to me that it keeps going down.
I like it.
And it's for various reasons. I don't like it. So
well, I mean, the need is going away.
It's not going away. It's moving away. That's different.
Yeah.
We live in Auburn. This is the only thing we can control.
I just want to have that on the record that I'm saying that it's concerning to me, but I don't want any changes right now.
Well, we could always, part of our branding campaign is like, if you're poor and you're hard up, come on into Auburn.
That's inappropriate, Mr. Mayor.
Oh, absolutely appropriate. I mean, we should be happy that need is going away in Auburn. Every other community should strive to do what we do. If need keeps going away, those people aren't, going away. We're helping them, lifting them up, having empowering. And this is spoken from a kid who grew up in a trailer park and didn't have Christmas for a lot of years. Okay.
Not if they're moving out of our town, we're not lifting them up and helping them.
Yeah. So IT. Information technology, anything in the operational budget? Obviously, a big chunk of that decrease was moving back into the new Department of Communications. Is there anything in their CIP that anybody has questions, issues, additions about?
What benefit do we get with our new parking enforcement software? Oh, sorry, I'm in the wrong section. My bad.
No. You're in IT. You're in information
It is
technology.
IT, right? Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you're in.
Bill, you oversee IT. You've been involved in that parking issue for years as police chief. Any comments on that?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of rules that are changing as far as at a federal level on what you can actually, how you can mark a vehicle. So normally you can no longer do the chalk on somebody's car. So you have to be able to track when they're coming in. If we had meters in our city, we would not need to have necessarily this same type of software system. The software system we have right now allows us to track it, mark, be able to know where the vehicle is, be able to track where it's at, as well as the license plate, as well as a photo. So that way there, when we come back through, probably the most complaints we receive has to do with a person receiving a parking ticket. And so having the proper software, having the evidence, I guess you could say, to show the photo that this is where your vehicle was parked, it was parked in this handicapped spot, all that information. But it also tracks information as far as people who don't necessarily are up to date on their permits or pay for their fines. So it knows whether or not this vehicle is what we would call a scofflaw, which means that they're above what the ordinance allows for you to have for balance, and then you could go ahead and impound that vehicle.
Is that automated from the vehicle?
Is what automated from the vehicle?
Checking the license plates for that type of stuff?
So we do have a license plate reader within the department. We don't put it on the parking enforcement vehicle. That's on a different vehicle that patrols within the city.
What, can you just go into a little bit more detail? Where would we need parking meters to offset a $30,000 software increase? what parts of the city, or where kind of would that need to be?
Parking, well, I probably have given 2 or 3 presentations as your police chief over the years regarding parking meters. There's no appetite to move forward with parking meters. What we have had some talk about is regarding providing a lot that is, I guess you could say, metered in a way, and it's what you would see in most parking garages or even in surface lots where it's a pay and display system. I think Councilor Walker and Councilor Young and a few others were working with a group of us on how to do that in certain areas of the city. The software doesn't go away. The software is consistent. And just to follow up on your LPR, the license plate reader question, this software does link into that system. So it's the same database. So you will be able to get immediate alerts on the handheld for the parking enforcement officer. Remember that the entire parking system is what brings in close to around $140 or so thousand when you look at the parking management system that we have in the city. That money goes towards caring and paying for servicing the parking garage. One change in that system changes the whole thing. So you can't have parking permits unless you're doing parking enforcement, or else people would just park on the street wherever, and there would be no turnover in front of businesses. All of it has to work together, but you can do some lots where it's pay and display, and we've talked about that. We actually have quotes on that. I think that's a good system if we decide to move forward with it. But there's a lot of capital money up front that just hasn't made it to the level of the council supported.
This software is scalable, though, correct?
Software is scalable in the sense that it's meeting the needs of our city rather than a larger program. Is that what you mean?
We're assuming a commercially viable downtown where higher turnover of traffic's needed for that, that viability. One of the big things is with parking in our downtown areas, you want that turnover so more patrons can visit the commercial shops. So can it be scaled up, multiple users, multiple trackings?
With probably some minor, and I wasn't involved in this process. Chief Moen might have some more information on this, but I would say that if you add users, it might be a small additional cost to get it to where you need it for. If we were at a point where we were hiring more parking enforcement officers, or if we were tying this into our pay and display system, there might be an up fee for those added services.
Got it. Is there consensus? I mean, that was a good question. Is there consensus of whether or not that's needed or not even consensus? Any other thoughts? Nothing? Yeah, move on. That was it for IT. Going into intergovernmental, Peter already talked a little bit about this, and unless Peter, Phil, is there anything you all want to add on intergovernmental? I mean, there's only a couple line items here. Or do we want to wait until we get the LATC numbers kind of hashed out a little bit more?
Well, I think the question is how much detail do you want to get into? Council McLeod and the mayor and I participated in a meeting with Marcia Bennett, who's the coordinator for LATC Transit, and also Lewiston folks, just to talk through the CARES funding that we're getting from the federal government for LATC, which is $2.5 million. The meeting on Monday, April 27th, we could show you a slide that would break it down for you, so it would be easier to understand. I don't know if Councilor McLeod or you may or want to make any comments, but it's an opportunity for us to be able to utilize some of those funds to be able to have zero increase on intergovernmental services. But by doing that, there is a consequence. Basically means you're pushing the cost forward to FY22. But it would help us. Councilor McLeod, Mayor, I don't know if you want to add anything or you want to wait until Monday.
I think waiting for just to see the slide to show everybody would be helpful to show the pitfalls of doing it one way or the other, because they're both feasible, but it just depends on how we want to go about it.
What's that old adage? Penny wise, pound foolish. That's kind of where we're up against potentially right now too. You know, a quick shot in the arm is great, but unless it's counteracted next fiscal year, the fiscal year afterwards, it could be damaging. I will say though, I am concerned, and I want to make sure that everybody's cautious with using federal monies to fund policy initiatives that have yet to be approved by the policymaking board. Okay, it has a tendency to happen, and once policy initiatives or policies changed due to non-local sources of funds, it's hard to change that policy. So I'm not saying it's going to happen like this, but anything like that with regards to CARES money coming in, we just have to be extra careful on where it's appropriated.
I agree about that, Mr. Mayor. I think it's important that we realize what this money is, what it's meant for, and that it's got a real short shelf life.
Got it. Okay. Anything else on intergovernmental? Again, LATC we'll talk about on Monday. LA Arts is, just to point this out, and I will state it publicly here, that they're doing a darn good job. Very, very impressed with what they're bringing to our community right now. And we'll talk more about that public art displays and what they've done. It's just from a complete 180-degree switch from when I first became mayor to now. I've just had 3 short years, so quite happy with that. If not, we'll move on from intergovernmental to mayor and council. Any questions on mayor and council operationally on the operation budget?
Did we use all of our money from the last fiscal year in this category, in the general and the special event details? Or is there some of that money going into the fund balance?
I'd have to look at the details on that. I think you're pretty close.
Okay.
Yeah, the special event, I did check with Sabrina regarding that. We were pretty much used almost the entire amount already. So that's been covered. So maybe a clarification. I know this came up at one of the last meetings. So within budgeting, you're going to notice that we have consistent descriptions of line items. And so you'll see special event as the description header, just like Councilor Walker asked about tires, tubes, and chains. All departments will use that same category, but they may not have tubes and chains. They may just have tires. But that's the financial, as we set up our finance software, we have all those headers. And so those headers are used throughout. Special event is another header. So even though it says special event, it may be different within those departments. So a special event in the mayor council budget has to do with New Year's Eve, where special event and city manager's budget has to do with Auburn Community Band, has to do with holiday decorations, has to do with within the city, has to do with employee recognition and some other activities like that. So each one of them are a little different as they break out.
I've got a question. I thought under special events in the council budget paid for the fireworks and the balloon festival.
So that would be under the special event that's under rec. The Great Falls, I'm sorry, the balloon festival and the 4th of July event comes under the rec budget special event. That's who coordinates. Sabrina sits on that and facilitates that process.
So then why is there New Year's Eve in our budget then?
Well, it was a continuation. If you remember back with the 150th anniversary is where that money landed. And I think that if this will be consistent moving forward, and if the council would rather, we can move that into the REC's special event out of the mayor and council. It's just a line item transfer so that it's consistent with the other events. But that was at one time that came in as far as the 150th and then carried over as the New Year's Eve.
It might be better suited there.
Yeah.
Just on a go forward.
Yeah, I'd rather see a much smaller citizen engagement fund and then the rest of it being moved to the rec department.
For New Year's Eve.
Since it's our budget, mayor and council, shouldn't us councilors and mayor get a monthly tracking of what was spent where?
You get your financial report every
Yes, but broke down further so we know what line items were spent for.
You get the monthly financial report that Jill provides, and then if you have questions, certainly we answer them or we get the information for you.
This is interesting, Councilor Gary, and the last the only 2 New Year's Eve events. I worked very closely with Sabrina Best, looking at the budgets, looking at where the money's going to, and making sure the accounting was there. I did have a follow-up question that I brought up last week on that. It would seem that we're allocating overtime for fire, EMS, police, all 3 or 2 out of the 3, in their respective budgets, as well as annotating it here in our budget when we're actually doing the work. So I just want a little bit more clarification on that. In other words, I don't want to pay the PD $5,000. They already have $5,000 allocated from overtime, where that $5,000 from this budget, wherever it ends up landing, could be appropriately used for another event or to enhance a current event.
Yeah, we certainly wouldn't pay in both accounts. I think PD was seeing this as a continuing event, and so has that within their line item. I did ask Sabrina. She's breaking that out in the detail for us, but she believes that's also included there. Fire, even though, again, special event, community event overtime for fire was a larger amount. But remember, they also have storms. They have other items within that line item. Their actual amount for special events overtime is around $3,900, is what the chief had said was budgeted for special event. Out of that $30,000 line item, but budget's $3,900. And then when you get your answers to your questions that you asked previously, you're going to see the breakdown from the police department on the different events, including all the events are listed in there, all the road races. So the police overtime for this is about $19,000. But keep in mind, we have a lot of road races, and we have a lot more police staff at these events than we would having assigning a fire truck.
Okay.
I also had a question last time when we discussed this about some of the events that make a lot more money, potentially putting in some money to pay for this overtime. I think it's great, and I think the assistant city manager mentioned that we see it as a donation, but the event is making so much money. Do we ask them to help actually pay for that overtime?
Like taxing nonprofits. I think that's a great idea.
Not taxing nonprofits, asking them for a donation.
Well, we can ask donations from nonprofits in Auburn. I think that's a good idea.
I'm saying events, money-making events.
I know a lot of nonprofits make a lot of money.
Anyway, that was my question, and I was just curious about
I
that.
would just, and Phil mentioned that that question is on that portal that we're going to show you at the end, that you can look at the different answers, and it'll show a list of the events that are being supported by that. And you can, as a council, have a discussion about which events you'd like to see us continue to do that with, or if you want any changes made.
I think that would be a good discussion to have at some point.
A very lonely discussion, picking winners and losers in the nonprofit world. That would be kudos to any elected official that's going to take that one on. So.
We could see the amount of money that's made, and what's that percentage of that is that we're paying for.
Look at the CEOs and employees of nonprofits just in Auburn and Lewiston. They're making more money than city staff, and it's a nonprofit, making more money than the private sector. There's a great argument.
Not in our office.
Huh? We could have that discussion too. Councilor Zani brought it up. I think it's a good one.
Is there a reason why the city audit funds come out of the mayor and council budget compared to finance or somewhere else?
When I became city manager, that's where it was. I haven't made a change to that. I think the idea is that you are the elected officials, you're the policy-making board, you're overseeing city government, and you want to have sound financial management. And that's why the money is in the budget for the mayor and city council.
Okay. I'm just piggybacking a little off what Councilor Gary was saying. To me, the mayor and the city council section should be money that is allocated for us to expense as needed. So citizen engagement. So we take New Year's Auburn out. take the city audit out, community events is ours, recognition is ours, stuff like that. Because when you look at the budget just at face value, there's a ginormous budget that the mayor and city council have, when in fact our actual accounting is not a lot of money for the amount that, you know, we get paid, the amount we give out in the community and citizen engagement, office supplies, stuff like that. Like the total number is not a lot. And I just think it would be a little more impactful to see it that way. Same thing with dues and subscriptions. I'm not sure what we get for that giant number of money for the elected officials themselves rather than city and staff.
MMA's in there too.
Is it?
So that's
Yes, Maine Municipal Association dues are in there.
Okay.
They're over 20,000.
I'd like to propose, and I mentioned it earlier by accident, that we take the Mayor's Coalition membership ceases. Future mayors may see value in that. At this point, I do not. I'd like to see half of that allocated towards travel for the mayor, travel events for the mayor. There's a lot of learnings away, i.e. the National Mayors Conference, National League of Cities, I'm sorry, and the National Mayors Conference. I've attended bits and pieces as much as I could sneak into both. That they're very, very strong shows and events, great learnings. I'll give you an example. Portland sends 7 out of 9 of their city councilors and their mayor every year. That might be a little extreme, but you know, myself and another counselor going to this or a staff member going, I think would be beneficial.
How much money does that mean, Mr. Mayor?
I'm not sure. I didn't look it up, but I mean, right now, you're looking at the Mayor's Coalition's 3,200.
No, I mean, how much money would that make available? If
That would be another $1,600 added into what we currently have in under PS. Right now, it's minimal. I mean, we have $500 under travel and mileage. Yeah.
I mean, I think that's worthwhile.
Yeah, and you know what? Honestly, maybe I forgot it was 500. We might want to just transfer all that in there, that 3,200 into that event, so it's revenue neutral. And again, like I said a couple of weeks ago, I've been paying for these trips out of my own pocket. That's not fair to future mayors, and frankly, it's not fair to me and my family. And this is I'm doing city business, so yeah, getting in that fiscal kind of policy now, I think is important for the future.
It might also be good to be aware for the future of what a list of things that would be recommended and basically what they cost so we can do it proactively.
I could put something together too. I mean, and again, this list has been just kind of growing a little bit and more clarity as my term as mayor has transpired. But the National League of Cities and the National Mayors Conference are both extremely, I think, from the agendas. And I know I've shared some agendas with some of these conferences to you all as a council just to look at it. There's some really good ones there. So, and we, you know, look to Peter too and some of his expertise in MMA as they go to their membership goes to some of these conferences as well. Yeah. Council, any thoughts on that?
I think it's a good idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, just to agree and say that the National League of Cities in particular is a really excellent organization. We should really do more to work with them.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I am annually invited to the Kauffman Foundation on Entrepreneurs for Mayors. Last year, I got all the way to Baltimore and had to turn around because the tornadoes canceled all the flights. So that was a horrible thing. But that was all expenses paid.
Yeah.
So that was a good one. We keep trying to search out these free or expense paid trips as well.
Still, it would be worth it, as you said, to come up with a list and, you know, whether you say which ones you think are most important and what the cost is.
I'll come up with a short list in the next week. That's pretty easy. Okay. That's my comments on that. Anything else on mayor and council? Any councilor want to take a pay decrease during this crisis? Okay.
Sure.
Cool. Just give it back as a contribution to something, right? Police, PD, operations. Any subtractions, additions? Oh, don't worry, I just called 911. Chief Moen's doing something right now, so you know he's chasing down my lead. So he's not watching. So you guys can say anything you want.
I think they answered, I mean, they answered my questions at presentation.
It's not time now to bring up CIP for the police, right?
The CIP is pretty big. Yeah, we'll go right into that. If there's anything else in operations, or if there's nothing else in operations, we can move into CIP.
I would like to see us cut the number of police vehicles he has from 5 to 3.
I think the manager had cut it down to 4, didn't you, Mr. Manager?
Yes, I did reduce it from what he originally requested.
So you'd be going from 4 to 3, Belinda.
Yes.
Yeah.
So 212 is 4 vehicles.
Yes, for the fit up cost.
15,000 a vehicle.
Yeah.
Thanks.
That seems cheap. Is that cheap? Does that include all the light bars and everything else? Or are we recycling the old ones to the new?
It's a good price for those types of vehicles, believe it or not.
That's why I questioned it. No, I remember last year I thought the all-in was like 70 or something, but I could be wrong.
Is that a time sensitive price?
So we do go out to bid once we do this. These are estimates of what we believe that they are. So this is all new equipment because we're changing out the vehicle. You can't put what you have in one vehicle into a different vehicle, so that has to change out those mounting brackets, all those things. So that does change that. But to your point, Mayor, yes, it also includes the trade-out value of vehicles. We put one line item because we really don't know what it is. We're estimating what we believe we're going to get for these trade-outs and what the bid will come in at.
Do we get with the current situation, and it's sort of mean to think that you're going to profit off from somebody else's misery, but with the car companies, I mean, they're going out of their way to get rid of vehicles at this point, trying to move them at all. Is there any chance that when you do your bidding that we would get any of that type of financing or the better deals from that?
They're all very competitive when they bid. I mean, I've been doing this for a long time with some of these companies. And so they'll be competitive when they put their bids in. They'll make sure they sharpen their pencils. We'll get the best price. We follow the financial policy on selecting a vendor to the letter. But one thing the chief does is he will look at, sometimes like what you're saying, Councilor Carey, is that they might be trying to move something off a lot. And so he'll monitor that. And we've had times when it made more sense to go ahead and pick up a vehicle because it was priced down to a price that you couldn't beat that price. And so we've gone before the council. We made that special appropriation to be able to get that vehicle that way. So he monitors those pretty closely.
So I have a couple questions. One, did we talk about the body cameras being phased in?
It's not on the recommended.
No, it's not. I mean,
Sorry.
Phil can speak to this because of his.
That's okay.
As police
Do you
chief.
want to add it?
That system is on its last legs, right, Phil?
So it's already a year out of warranty. So when they go out, I mean, there's no video in the cruiser, and that is not a place where you want to be for our agency.
Yeah.
Zanya, is that what you were talking about? I thought you said
Body.
body.
Yeah, body cameras are being phased. That's in a couple of years. You might see that come forward, but right now this is just your cruiser cameras.
Yeah, no, I was asking about the body cameras. Thank you. And the last one I have on here is the motorcycles. What do we decide that we're doing with them? I felt sort of that the reason that one of the reasons to have them was it was sort of a showing the community who we are and being able to be in front of parades. And I just want to make sure that we're making a really good decision about purchasing motorcycles.
Well, we also do a lot of enforcement with our motorcycles. So they'll go out and we do a lot of traffic enforcement with those. They're great for monitoring somebody who is texting and driving, coming up alongside that vehicle. So they are an active tool for the police department. And unfortunately, the LA Harley Harley
Yeah.
itself is phasing out that program, but LA Harley is giving you a great deal on these motorcycles to continue. They're the ones that we've had for the last couple of years. It's just now they're transferring whatever the value is over to us.
Yeah, and it's nice to support a local business. Thank you.
And they were able to spread it out so we don't have to do it all in 1 year.
Right. Okay.
Can I
Didn't
ask-
one time have a bike patrol, a regular bicycle? And they did a lot of outdoor events as well as monitoring what's going on at the 4th of July event. Police officers at the time, they liked to have the bicycles because they could come up upon a situation and catch somebody quicker because they weren't seen coming.
They still have some bikes. It's about training, and right now staffing hasn't allowed them to be able to use it because they need to be able to get in their vehicle because of the call volume and 67 square miles. They've got to cover other areas. So unless you have somebody designated to an event to be able to use that, that's one thing. But to patrol with, it makes it really difficult with staff with the call volume. And I think Chief Moen could probably address that more, but that would be why we haven't used them recently, at least in the last 5 years, probably.
I would, if I could recommend that we take that concept about bicycle patrol, because it is great community policing. There's a lot of positives here, but yes, there's a lot of trade-offs. As we start building our downtown, more foot traffic, more individuals might warrant periodic bicycle patrols in that concentrated urban area.
Yeah, they'll work them into their patrolling when it's appropriate right now, especially so if we get a rash of motor vehicle break-ins, they'll put somebody out on a bike and have them patrolling on that. And we've had great success with that over the years. So they'll use them when they need to, but I would agree, Mayor, as we continue enhancing downtown and what that looks like, having a better presence there will be important. I love walking beats. I think, those are a great community policing tool. And but as we grow, then that's when you would implement it.
Yeah, we could save some money, bring back the old police call boxes on the telephone poles, get rid of your walkie-talkie things.
Love it.
Can I ask 2 questions about the motorcycles?
Yeah.
Do you know roughly how many of our officers are trained to ride the motorcycles?
I wouldn't be able to give you a number. I mean, I recall it being, at least 4 or 5 or more, probably. At least there's a couple on each squad, I think, that are trained. So that would be 2, 4, 5, 6, close to 8 probably, and maybe even more within that have been reassigned to another division. So you could have upwards of 10 people that are trained in that currently.
And my second question is, hoping to continue our motorcycle patrols. What does a pair of motorcycles cost 5 years from now when we need to replace them and we don't have the Harley program? That's just a general question, not for this budget, but moving forward, they're not cheap, I assume, to buy and outfit if we continue with Harley or Honda or whoever we go with. Just an idea of what one would cost to get a new one on the road in a couple of years from now if we needed it.
Sure.
Problem with motorcycles is the days are limited to how many times you can ride them and when, between the rain, between fall, winter, spring. And these things are not worth the $40,000 and $50,000 that they're going to cost in the future. It's a hell of a deal to buy these for 18, but to buy a brand new one, I mean, I bought one that was close to new, and I spent 18 grand just for that one bike. And new ones, for what they need, are going to be up there twice that high.
Okay. Is there anything else on police on either CIP or operations? I mean, we talked a little bit. I don't think there was really, we talked about cutting down the number of cruisers. I'll ask this again. Is there a desire here, other than that general question, to cut the number of cruisers down, as Councilor Gary kind of discussed?
I like the idea of going down to 3, and I also, have looked around a lot to see the vehicles they have, and I know they take good care of them to keep them looking nice on the road. I can't tell you if everything is running good, but I think we've got a pretty good handful of vehicles that would last us to the next budget, and hopefully we have some money to buy for next year, but we never know that. And they're buying much better vehicles, according to the chief, this time out. So maybe they'll only need 3 next year. I don't know what they'll need, but I agree that 3, if we need to make this cut, 3 should be good enough for them. I still would like the gasoline to be talked about. We can almost get gas right now for peanuts. So whatever their peanuts are, if we went out to bid 6 months ago or 4 months ago, we should be looking at it again, and maybe we go out to bid again because, unless something really happens quick here, gas, it's the time to go and get it right now. It's not worth anything to the people that are selling it.
My kids are drinking unleaded instead of milk now because it's so cheap.
We did go out to bid just recently, Counselor, and I don't have the amount right here on top of my head, but we did get a really good rate. But then when we do go out to bid and we lock in, it's for a certain amount of gallons that we have to use as well. So there's that piece that we have to make sure we're meeting the what we agreed to on a bid. But right now we do have a good rate that'll be coming into effect when we move forward. And for the vehicles, just remember when you shift off that schedule, if you reduce it another one, you're shifting the replacement schedule, which might mean we need to come back and look at increasing vehicle repairs. Every one of the vehicles that now, because the manager reduced it from 5 to 4, all 4 of those now have over 100,000 miles once they trade out. So you will see a transmission, you'll see a front end, you'll see some added costs that are going to come in there. So that might need to increase just so we can keep it maintained on the road.
Yeah, I'll say this though. Yeah, to piggyback what Phil just said about cruisers, we're worrying and being cautious about this budget. It's next budget that worries me more than this. Next, because we can control the variables now and the unknowns. They're pretty well known. It's next year. I'd rather see 4 cruisers bought now than 3 plus 4 next year. And I'm still waiting on bond rates, and we all are, of course, on what the rates are and what the projections might be. But from what I'm seeing on my end, bond rates are pretty low right now, which is a positive. They might have gone up a little bit. Again, we need some of that data. Munis are a little different, of course, but it might be better to borrow the money today than it is a year from now. So when we think about that and look at that ROI with money and the cheapness of money, and basically what the projections are on bond rates, which are all hypothetical, of course, just projections, there might be an argument here to get 5 cruisers this year and not 4.
I have a quick question, Mr. Manager, about the gasoline or the fact that we've gone out to bid and we've got a good rate.
Yes.
And we're required to buy so many gallons. And the school department just went out to bid and they got a really good rate. Is there some kind of an agreement we have with the school department that if we need gas from them, we can get gas from them, they can get gas from us? We could get a better rate if we'd gone together. And because I know that they're talking about replacing the tank, or they are replacing the tank at the schoolyard. The diesel would be replaced by the regular gas tank. So if you have, say, the city has vehicles over on this side of town, actually need to get gas, they can get it over there, and they're going to be sending the diesel buses over to the public utilities to get the gas over there. I mean, does it make sense for us to be on 2 separate wavelengths when we're talking about buying fuel and not buying it just as the city?
Nope.
And doing it that way, as opposed to keeping it being, the school's got their stuff and we've got ours?
Well, I think you're raising some good questions. Derek Belanger talks on a regular basis with Adam Hansen, and they talk about these kind of issues. I don't know the specifics on what their arrangement is versus ours. Sometimes we are in an agreement, like with Maine Power Options, for example, on what we do with them on electricity and so forth. That's different than what the city is. We saw that with solar power. They work with a different entity, the different vendor than we do. But I can certainly follow up with Derek and ask him those questions and see what his thoughts are on that. But I am confident saying that they talk about those things on a regular basis.
It's been looked at years back, and there are some sticky things there that says that we can't really do it together because of either, I don't know, either because the federal are involved in it or the state's involved. So we won't be able to buy the same gas from the same places at the same time.
That rates right up with the rule about us getting the water for the fire department.
Yep, it does. It does.
So I would like to piggyback a little about what the mayor was saying, that if we put this out to bid for 4 and we find out that what Councilor Carrier was saying, that they're just trying to throw cars out the window, I think it would be advantageous for us as a city, as part of the recovery, to almost pre-purchase another cruiser now to save us money in the future, if that's something that were to come to fruition.
That sounds like a great idea, but these vehicles that the police department is trying to buy, they're not going to be throwing them out any windows. Trust me. These are great vehicles compared to what they've run in the past. And they get more expensive because we're going to better vehicles and bigger ones and heavier ones, and hopefully they're going to last longer. But if we got to come back in 4 years and buy 4 more because we bought these, I don't think we're going to save a lot in the long run.
I think what Councilor Walker's saying is, it's true. I mean, these are special vehicles that we're getting, but if it turns out that we have a great opportunity to be able to get 5 instead of 4, certainly we would take advantage of that.
Bring back the Volvos. Y'all remember those?
Yeah, that was a lot of fun.
If you don't remember, for some of you who might not have been here, 30 years ago, APD drove Volvos. We were hip back then.
They
I think
weren't
I'm
worth a
everything.
shit.
The former chief who ruined that. So, nothing else on PD. Let's move along to Public Works. Start with the Public Works operation budget first, and then get into the CIP, because they're pretty lengthy on both sides, of course. Okay, is there any questions, additions? Looking at, again, strategic plan, I'll keep reminding us to look at that. Downtown area, what are we seeing here? Is there any problems, any questions? Comp plan went into effect. We gave some people some raises to bring them up to industry standards. Okay, I got no questions as people kind of go through their notes. We're going to segue into CIP. Is there anything on the CIP side of things?
I had a question about striping the center line for Public Works. Why do we contract that out versus having a striper and do it ourselves?
We don't have the type of vehicles and stuff it takes to do center lanes, and I don't think we could afford to purchase the machine that they need and have the safety people involved with us.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Walker.
Is there anything else on CIP for Public Works? Capital expenditures. Then I want to segue into road construction as well. Okay, because it's kind of relevant.
As you know, Mayor, that I'm never in favor of buying as many vehicles, and I've sent in my thoughts, and I'm going to leave it like that. I'm not going to say which one should be cut or whatever, but there should be some cuts in this CIP because they want this, and I understand it. When I was also in a position that they're in, I always wanted new vehicles. Even if the one I had could go another year, I still wanted a new vehicle. And I'm not saying that Dan doesn't look at everything. He probably does. But it's just too much money all at once, unless you're telling me that we can buy some of these vehicles at one heck of a deal and get them now. But I just, I just think we go look at their fleet again and just think about it. And if I'm wrong, I'll listen to anything you have to say. But I think their fleet is better than most public works fleets around here. And it used to be 20 years we kept a vehicle and we maintained it. We went down to 15. Now we're down to 10. There's no limit to what this ends up costing us over the years. It's just too much money for these vehicles. They're going crazy, not public works. The people that sell them, they're going crazy with what they think they're worth. And it's just getting out of hand.
Yeah.
Just a comment, I appreciate what Councilor Walker is saying. You'll see that what was originally requested, I've reduced it down because of budget constraints. And I asked the Public Works Director to put together what he thought he needed for his CIP. The other thing that I would say is look at the detail that's in the CIP section of the booklet, and it'll give you an explanation on vehicles. If you want to look at that, I think that would help you if you have questions about vehicles. But I think the Public Works Director does a very good job, and I have recommended what he has prioritized. My recommendations are based on his priorities.
I would just add too, just for the new counselors, there were no vehicles purchased last year for PW because we moved forward with the fire truck.
Right.
So these vehicles are being brought in this year because they were put off last year.
So I don't see, I remember he brought up the trailer for resurfacing, but I don't see that in the CIP. Was that not a recommended event? He wanted to be able to get a lower public works person who didn't need a special license to drive that truck.
Yeah, where's that?
And that would have cost and there was going to be like a financial analysis, see how much that would really save us by not having a Class A driver, Class A, versus having someone pull a pickup.
Yeah, they already have the trailer. It's just the truck request.
Right.
Is that the 1-ton truck, Phil?
1 ton.
1 ton.
That's
At 120,000 for the one. Okay. Yeah, but there still was. I remember what Councilor McLeod said. There was an ROI, kind of a rough back of napkin saying that we could save on payroll because you don't need a CDL.
Correct.
Yeah.
And the second question is, if they want to replace a 7-yard truck and a 12-yard truck, and they requested 430 and 488,000 respectively, what good does it do to them to give them half of what they're asking?
They were
We can't buy half the truck.
They were requesting 2. It was reduced.
2 of each. Thank you.
Each
Yeah.
one by 1.
And again, what I'm recommending is what Dan prioritized. I asked him to give me his priorities.
I also think that we asked that too, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Manager, and we haven't seen all that
Well, the priorities are what I'm basing my recommendation on. So he started out with a request of almost 1.9 million in that particular section for public works equipment, and I'm recommending 792,000 based on his priorities.
And that 1-ton truck would allow us to pull the pavement trailer. That's what that's for, right?
It would be permanently mounted in the bed of that
Right.
truck.
Yes, that one.
You just get in and go.
No trailer, just on the truck.
Yeah, thank you.
Right.
Let's talk a little bit about reclamation. Before we get into reclamation and roads, I can't remember when Dan presented this information, and it was a year or so ago, but it came in handy for us to conceptualize what we have. We have 67 square miles of city, the largest city in the state of Maine, and the East Coast, if I remember correctly. 260 some odd miles, 250 some odd miles of road that are our responsibility here in Auburn. Works out to being around 53 linear square feet per man, woman, and child in the city. Lewiston is around 33 feet per person. Portland, I think, was like 21, 22. I mean, we have more land and agricultural in our ag zone than Portland has land, to put it in a little bit of perspective. Our debt, if you would, that unfunded mandate or partially unfunded mandate to maintain or replace our roads is around $10,000 per resident of the city. So just because of the linear feet per person. We're going to, council is well before us literally looking at the last 100 years history of Auburn. They've been battling. There's arguments at the turn of the century, the last one, or 2 ones ago, about not building any more roads because of what would happen to future generations. We're living it. They were right. They built the roads, though. Now we're dealing with it. We really have to start looking at how do we increase our tax valuation per mile of road? How do we take that 53 linear feet per person and bring it down to something more manageable? Discontinuing roads, if at all possible. I don't think it is. But we have to start breaking that cycle. And, I'm not sure what other councils have done to start breaking that cycle. But I think part of our strategic plan is quality of life, downtown. We really need to focus on this. And I'm not sure if we're going to spend our way out of this. I don't think it's physically possible. So we're going to have to find something else, another solution. So that's my soapbox for that. Something to think about here, because we're not spending nearly enough of what we should be on road maintenance.
Mayor, you said how many miles or how many lane miles?
250 miles plus or minus. I wish Dan was here to fact check me.
It's 555 lane miles.
Yeah.
Oh, lane mile. Okay. And then it was a 53 linear feet road frontage per man, woman, and child. So, and then it was like $200 or something per foot for reclamation to redo the road. So, but yeah, okay. So it's a lot of roads.
That's why we want residents on our inner core, downtown core, so that they're not driving on all those roads.
Remember, one tractor trailer truck is worth 16,000 passenger vehicle trucks or transits. Okay. So that it's a tractor trailer truck that will equal 16,000 passenger vehicle trips. But we also have to wonder, and I'll say this, you've got a road that is not a major thoroughfare entry point into the city or a cut through. There's different classifications, of course, that has 5 houses on it in South Auburn. Does that warrant us spending money to repave that road? Should we let it go back to what it was 40 years ago, which was dirt and gravel?
You want to reduce the taxpayers' taxes that they pay? They probably wouldn't mind that, but not at the cost that they're paying today.
We don't have enough of them paying. That's the thing.
We got to bring more people in, right?
There has to be a balance. And what are people willing to pay for? I mean, we look at the average cost of maintenance in a car in Maine, especially in Auburn.
I can tell you on the Jordan School Road, they put asphalt from one end, which is from the River Road all the way to the Pownell Road. And there wasn't 2 people that live on that road that asked them to do that. The city decided they were going to do it, and it was in their master plan, and they did it. And that was years and years ago. Then the River Road went into the river, and the state said, well, we want to use your road as a detour, so we'll put asphalt on it now. And the road is still in crappy condition because whatever the state had put on the road was about as good as nothing. So it held up for their 6 months that they needed it. But again, the taxpayers out there did not ask them to put asphalt on that road. It's a choice that the city made. Now the taxpayers have to pay the taxes. And I was one of them out there. We said we do not want your asphalt. We're happy with you grading the road 2 times a year, and that's all they were doing. 2 times a year. They ditch it once in a while. We were happy as hell out there. But they put that, whatever they want to call it, down, and it turned into liquid gold now, and the taxpayers have to pay the price.
Is it worth, council? Do we want to relook at our road paving priorities as a council? Do we want to get a presentation on that? Do we want to first see if there's any roads and just focus at least on the roads that are on the list, the upcoming budget?
Are you asking for that to happen now before we do our budgets or something after the fact? Because to me, it could be a larger discussion, a larger presentation that I don't know if we can settle within this time. But I appreciate what Councilor Walker is saying, that we need to control what happens with our roads.
Well, how about this, Mr. Manager? If we, obviously, the dollar amount's a dollar amount.
Correct.
That's what we're working on now. But if we want to look at the prioritization of those roads, or maybe even look at, some of those roads that are currently in the list in which the money was derived from, the amount was, that maybe they shouldn't be, and that money should be allocated to a different road. And that's all hypothetical, but that wouldn't need to happen until after the budget's been approved.
I think that works, and Dan can give you a report on that. He has a very methodical approach in terms of how he looks at the condition of the roads, and there are a lot of roads in the city, over 400 different roads. So he's got them all rated by condition, so he can give a report to you.
Okay, and that way it would be nice for us to have the opportunity to bounce that priority list against what the residents of Auburn picked in their strategic plan. Okay,
Right.
Seeing if in our downtown vision, if we're all in alignment or at least close to. Okay.
And even some feedback from residents on specific roads that I've gotten.
Every road in Auburn, if you ask the people who live on the road, is a horrible road.
Well, Whitman Spring Road is pretty bad.
That is pretty bad, and that is something that if it's recreation is on our strategic plan, it needs to be addressed if we're going to encourage recreation on that property.
Exactly. It's not on the list currently.
No. Okay, so we'll dig into that then, probably when time allots, when we're done our portion of the budget into the summer. Okay, moving on to recreation, which includes Norway Savings Bank and Ingersoll and program. I kind of lumped them up. I'm sorry, Tim, Councilor McLeod.
So we've been at this 3.5 hours. Could we take a 2-minute recess?
If it's only 2 minutes, I just feel like getting through this.
All right, go ahead.
Well, you know what? Why don't we do? If you all need to just stand up and excuse yourself, come back.
Yeah, 2 minutes is fine.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll keep on running, but this is going to take a little bit. We're almost done, but let's let's take a 2-minute, just quick break if you need to go and stretch. It's been a long time, longer than I thought. Okay, welcome back. Good. I'm glad everybody had a break. We're going to pick up here. We are now into recreation operations budget, which will include Norway Savings Bank Arena, Ingersoll, and obviously the programming budget that recreation has as their centerpiece. Any questions on the operational budgets?
I think someone was going to bring us back information about the Festival Plaza on the amount of water we were using down there. If we're going to remove that, I'm sure that this cost of water is going to change a lot. And maybe electricity is going to be another factor too.
Yeah, I think further conversations on what we're going to do for that redesign need to happen, of course. I'd tell you, I'd be in favor of a dry feature versus a wet feature.
So I asked this before, and maybe it was the question was answered, but the recreation program specialist, 2.75 FTEs.
That position, if I recall correctly, that position is the position that supports the senior center.
Yeah, it was increased a few hours to
Correct.
support the senior center.
Right.
So, yeah, so there's a lot of moving parts when you talk about rec, and I think, Councilor Lasagna, I'm sure you're getting more acquainted with this, but there's some that comes under programming, some that comes out of rec. So when you look at your special revenue, that's where some of those percentages come from. So when we shifted the full-time individual that we had originally, and we shifted some to Ingersoll, and then that person is also doing other programming, and then that allowed for the part-time to go to 30 hours.
Okay.
And that person also was hired after the full-time employee was retired, and we brought her in, or he at the time, as part-time, which was a big savings. I don't remember the amount right now, but it was a big savings.
That's
And
right.
it's still a big savings overall right now.
You're correct. Yeah.
Thank you.
I'd like to bring up football. This has been an on and off conversation and brought up by many, many constituents about having our middle school, 7th and 8th grade football program housed at the rec department versus traditionally how it's been housed in Auburn and all over the state, except for I think 1 or 2 other municipalities, at the school department. There's a lot of issues that parents are having, safety issues, consistency with coaching from middle school into high school, overall strength of our high school. One parent told me, well, why are we going to have a multi-million-dollar football stadium if our football team is horrible?
So, Mr. Mayor, are you saying moving it out of rec into the school department?
Yes, exactly. And if that means we have to, I think it's more of control and synergy between the middle school and the high school programs. And if we have to give them a concession on compensation for this, let's do it. The other aspect is, granted, we have a lot of scholarships that we can give out to our players. This is a pay-to-play program. At the schools, it's not. But, I think it deserves a little bit more look and maybe some interaction with the school. But I'm sure the school does not want to have it.
I'm sure you're right on that point.
We've had some good conversation with the school. Mark and Sabrina have been talking with them about the football programming. The goal was to try to shift that this year. With other reductions at the school, that didn't happen, and so the goal would be that we can maybe move that for next year. To answer your question about the Festival Plaza, Council Walker. So the water is 4,000 and the electricity is 3,500.
Yeah, that's quite a bit, though.
Yeah.
I'd be in favor of transferring $6,900 from recreation, let's say, to the Auburn School Department to manage football.
Well, I think if they don't want to manage it, it's going to be a tough sell.
Well, I mean, it is about what's best for the kids and the student athletes too. So
I mean,
if it's not great financial, then let's compensate them on that. Again,
I don't think you'll find that's the real problem. I think once you meet with them and talk about this whole thing, you'll find why the recreation took over that a long time ago. There was a lot more to it than just money. Trust me, there was a lot more.
It might be, yeah.
We can have a conversation with them about if we have it budgeted, they could take over the running the program. We'll budget this year, and then they can just pick up the budgeting next year. We can ease into it and transition the program over.
I mean, this is one of the top, I'd say, 5 constituent complaints I had this past year. I literally will forward you all the emails and the conversations, and there are numerous from numerous different people. So it's a hot fun. It's a lot of passion involved in this.
It does make sense in terms of it being aligned in terms of coaching, even strategy, equipment, all of that, to have them be both in one place.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You're also going to see a big difference in the number of football players that will come out of the school under these conditions. Under the rec department, you have a lot more participated and can afford it and fit in than you'll see when you just involve it with the school.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to consider.
Yeah. And I just look at all the other municipalities in the state, or at least 98% of them, and that's how their programs are operated. It's consistent from middle school up. But thank you for looking at that and digging in. Is there anything else on the operations budget for Norway, Rec, Ingersoll?
One of the things I'd like to propose is the PAL Center funding. There's funding for some, I guess it's replacement of some in the CIP equipment, but I think we should give them another $10,000 to really create a good garden program, training program. You know, they're doing it on a shoestring. I think food insecurity is something that we all realize is really important in this community. I think with a more robust gardening program, and also they do a great job with, canning and all that, and training kids. To me, that's a good place to put some money.
I think you're going to find that in a CDBG presentation on May 4th, there's money earmarked for food insecurity. And then the drill down of that is the PAL Center.
Specifically around gardening and that whole idea?
I'll turn that over to Phil. I think Phil's still working on specifics with staff right now, but it was, if you follow the waterfall, it was a block for food insecurity. And then part of that block was made up of PAL Center programming. So I'm not sure if Phil's ready to talk about that or anybody else at staff.
Well, a lot of it has to do with the team that's available to staff it, right? And so we're very fortunate where we have Dennis Connolly, who's the master gardener that helps run and facilitate that program. I think they would be more than happy to continue expanding that if they have the capacity with either volunteers or something like that to continue doing. The mayor's right. I think you'll see that presentation next week as it drills down. There will be hopefully some funding that will be in there if the council approves those allocation amounts for that additional CDBG money.
I appreciate it because I was just saying that we do, between St. Mary's Nutrition Center and their Lots to Gardening program and also Master Gardening Program volunteers, I think that there's some good resources in place to be able to help them to expand that. I think they do an amazing job on what they've got, but I think there's a lot of potential there that we should support.
Mm-hmm.
Also, their facilities, right? There's nothing in CIP for the PAL facilities. You're talking about money for gardening and for programming, but I do think that, we all visited every building that's under rec, and I think that the PAL is clearly the one that's in most need of having some kind of additional funding to support chairs, tables, improvements to the facility. It's a small building. A little money would go a long way.
Phil, could you define where PAL falls under? Because it doesn't fall under rec.
Yeah, so there's a line item within rec for PAL that covers a part-time staff position and some utility and other supplies. PAL also has a board of directors that they raise funds and bring dollars in to run programming. That comes under the police chief by the bylaws as the chair or the president of the PAL board. So there are two, we kind of dance between two different entities here. But the PAL board, and unfortunately with the COVID, they had to cancel their strategic planning meeting that they had scheduled up at the community college. But they have one coming up to talk about the facility and talk about what that might look like moving forward as far as enhancing the facility, because they're max. They're, before they had to close, they were running anywhere between 60 and 80 kids a day in that small building. And so they are max currently. So I think you'll see something coming, and it's in the works.
Thank
Yeah.
I appreciate that. And they also spread across, they do after school stuff. They do, disciplinary, taking care of that for the schools. I think they also serve kids, and I don't know this for sure, but it would be nice to find out who don't necessarily access the rec programs for various reasons, whether it's physical access or having the money to be able to do it. I really think we should put some time and energy and money into that center.
What you guys don't know that right now, with all this food insecurity and the senior center meals program, the director of the PAL Center, he's been working tirelessly trying to make sure there's enough food for his families. He feeds over 100, I think over 130 people, families, kids, parents, a week. And he should deserve kudos. He's also been volunteering a lot at the senior center, helping them prepare meals, box them up, and helping distribute those as well. I mean, I'm not taking anything away from all the countless volunteers that does the senior program, but I wanted you to know that the PAL kids and families are still being took care of during this pandemic virus. And the city and the staff should have kudos for all that they've been doing to making sure families and seniors are not hungry.
Yeah, I think that's a great demonstration of a collaboration between a PAL program that has already had the relationship with Good Shepherd Food Bank and a team within REC to collaborate to make sure that the funding that you provided as a council are able to be leveraged with the resource that the PAL has with Good Shepherd to be able to meet this need. And that's been a great collaboration. And we are looking too to ensure that his time is covered under the COVID relief funds that come in, so that won't come out of the PAL budget.
I wonder if it's as part of the strategic, and I'm obviously not to dictate what they're doing, but to really look at who is using their center. And does it overlap with the rec? Is it different, to get a sense of the demographics of who's using the PAL Center? Because it might be somewhat different from those people who are accessing other resources, whether it's a senior center or rec.
I think what we can plan on, I'm sorry, Peter, go ahead.
No, that's all right, Phil. I just wanted to add that, and for new councils in particular, within the last couple of years, we have moved the PAL from under the police department budget to recreation, so that we can develop it more. And the police department's done a great job over the years, and I think having the partnership with the recreation department makes a lot of sense. And that's what I'm hearing from the comments that people are making tonight. So I think it's a real opportunity to try and expand on what we're doing there.
Yeah, I would just add that we'll plan on doing a really good presentation for the council after the budget, and talk about how does that fit into future planning as well. We do track all the students that participate, because we do, on occasions, we'll seek CDBG funding. So some of those numbers have to be tracked for that reporting. So we're able to do that, and we're able to give you some good demographics of who they're serving in the community.
Councilor Lasagna, keep in mind we have a beautiful tot lot up there, up by the lake, and we could have all kinds of planting going on up there. We own enough acreage up there that we could do a lot of things, and that's a perfect place for these people to spring off. And you only have to truck them up there with a van or something like that. It's not like they got to be there every day of the week, but depending on what they wanted to grow and put into place, we got all the spring water we need up there. We have a building that can help us to house different stuff, and that facility has been something great for this city. But the city has not been great for the tot lot facility. that would be a big charm if we would use it right and stop not wanting to do something for the people of this city. That is one place that we've just put it to the side and we've left it there and we haven't paid attention to it. And it is one great place to go and be able to celebrate, have a wedding, go up there and just have a picnic. It's something that we've just let go, that we should have never fallen into that trap. It's just like we had the only good swimming area that was set up that kids could go there, they could be bused there, they could enjoy the whole day. And because we couldn't find a few $1,000s to keep it open and come up with something that would work right, that is sit there like a dead duck. Again, we haven't done a good job in this city. As councilors, as management, it bothers me. I was there 40 years ago and we had something great going and we let it go because you only had a handful of people. That's like 100 that went there every day. Every day they went there. And then they stopped going. Their kids started coming. Now we've only taken care of 50 to 75 people. Well, you know what? That group didn't really matter to this city. Let them go to Taylor Pond. Let them go to Simpson Beach. Let them go to wherever. We don't have to deal with it, so let them go somewhere else. That's the kind of management we've had for a long time in this city. And hopefully we're going to get back to really seeing where things that are important for the people of our city get picked back up and start funding the money in the right places.
Well, if I look for clarification though, in the manager's recommended bonding, tot lots 15,000 is not there. So it didn't make the manager's cut, just so everybody's clear on that.
And Councilor Walker, I appreciate you talking about tot lot land in terms of community gardens, because perhaps that could become a community garden, a large community garden where a lot of people could have access to that. I think to think creatively about tot lot is a really great idea.
Have you been up there? Have all the councilors been up to tot lot recently?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Recently, no.
It doesn't.
You probably spent time as a kid like I did up there. And I still want that fountain. So if we look back at the strategic recommendations, and I just want to bring up a couple points here to contemplate. We had arts, culture, and recreation was about a 5.63 on the scale. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, call it 5. It was about 5th, right in the middle. We had transit at around 7th on the scale. We got and theoretically, if we run with Councilor Walker's concept of have 100 or so people that are using the tot lot consistently, I think it's more though. Not many with our rec program if they're still using it in the summer. Then you compare it to the buses where a few hundred people ride it, and we spend $300,000 to $500,000 a year on that. One would ask that, according to our strategic plan, recreation, arts, and culture are more important than transportation. And I do that not to pick on one or the other, but I think it's an important point to think about here. If we're looking at spending $300,000 to $500,000 a year on transport, buses, LATC, can we not afford $15,000 to rehab the tot lot?
Mr. Mayor, I also, when we were trying to figure out, I guess, where all this stuff should be placed, I think I met at almost every meeting that was called to go to and meet at, and I know Councilor Lazzoni was also there and a couple other people, and recreation was almost at the top every time. And then I don't know when it fell off the top, but if I remember right, it was in the top 3 all the way to, I guess, within the very tail end of it. And I don't know how it went from 1 to 2 to 2 to 3 to 3 to 4 and then to 5, because all of that blended together. All of us stayed in them meetings right to the end. And that recreation and arts and, whatever we could get around the city and to grab the city, even the walkability and stuff. That all stayed as very top. I'm not really happy with the 5 number that you just said was sitting at, because I think somehow something got juggled around there that.
Well, remember, this is just, and I should have stated this, this is the priorities based upon the polling done with just the city council a couple months ago. Okay, that, just to be clear, this is the city council prioritization of the top 11 items in the strategic plan. Okay,
But I don't think we should let that override what Councillor Walker is saying, because I felt the same way when I saw it, and we're only 7 individuals who are making these decisions.
But that's exactly how government works. We're 7 individuals that are making a representative decision, and if we pick and choose what priorities we follow and we don't, then we should not have priorities. Yeah, so that's just where we can't just say, okay, well, because everybody else said that. We are elected to do this job. Now, granted, sometimes it's going to be some muddling. Okay, absolutely. But there's a significant disparity between what we're spending on LATC versus tot lot. Now, tot lot's just part of recreation, and recreation is a large driver in our budget. But I think we need to ask ourselves, does tot lot fit a niche, a need within our city in order to satisfy an ultimate goal of being a recreation destination? And if the answer is yes, then it aligns with strategic plan, and then we need to fund it.
Well, maybe if there was a bus that went out there, that might make it more accessible.
Yeah. Okay. Anybody rode the bus? Sure. So let's. What do we think? Do we want to keep talking about this? Do you want some time to think about a $15,000 addition to tot lot, which is really, I think, what Councillor Walker's proposing?
What would it
I'll
do?
agree to that. The 15,000.
Yeah, I'd like to put that back in.
Can you tell me what it would be used for?
Roof, playground, rental hall, upgrades, maintenance.
I guess it's not very much money, but I would want, and I know Councillor Walker and those of you who have lived here a lot longer than I have used it. And when I've been out there, it's been not a lot of people, and it's obviously not in great shape. So $15,000 is not a lot of money.
Can we find some of that money within the rec CIP though, without having to add it? Like, the senior center phase 3 at 75,000. There's no wiggle room on that to bring that down a little bit more.
Not on that one, because we need to replace the hot water tank, and there's a few other little minor things for the senior center in order to make sure that it's more usable and user friendly, and be able to take senior events as well as any outside events.
How about if
You gotta have hot water to do dishes.
But I mean, a hot water tank is not $75,000.
No, but that's part of it. And then you've got some issues with parking. They've got to try to expand one place over there.
Can we look at? There's a couple different sources, and Councilor McLeod, you're obviously illustrating one, right? A substitution, if you would, but recreation. Those might fall under CDBG allocations with additional CARES money on the CARES bill for an additional CDBG to help fund that, just like we use CDBG for the senior center.
But too far out of the way, is it out? Well, the tot lot is by far out past the CDBG target area.
Mm-hmm.
There's some
based off from the population that you serve. That's how we're able to.
Right.
Do you think so?
Originally.
Okay, so I don't want to I'm just giving you some examples here. There's different pools of money that can be used for recreation. So maybe we can direct staff to look at that. And if we want to look at a pure substitution, we could, and I'll propose this right now, take and reappropriate connecting Hasty and Ingersoll, 20,000, the mezzanine viewing area at Ingersoll for 66, and the exterior signage for 20, plus the stage at 75, so a total of 180. I've got all this written down, by the way. 180 in potential reallocations. That would allow $15,000 for tot lot. What it also would allow, and I think we need to talk, this is just to spur this conversation, to further our communication plans through static communication, i.e. large marquee signs on Center Street, high traffic count, high visibility, multiple use, all within state codes. we'll still have money left over for more temporary signage at Ingersoll, the lesser quality than permanent, and to increase our rental stage budget. At this point, we take that $75,000 that we're going to use in the partnership, look at doing that next fiscal year with our partner, but taking about another $20,000 to $25,000 to augment our current stage rental budget that we currently have. I'm not sure how much is left in that budget, Phil or Peter, that we appropriated last year. I think we appropriated $50,000. I'm not sure what the balance is.
So how much are you going to be moving up to the tot lot for renovations?
15,000.
If you're going to take all that money, then put a bigger chunk up there.
Well,
Yeah.
just for clarification.
Clarification. Yeah, Bill, you and I probably think of the same thing. Mayor, the things that you mentioned, what I'm recommending is the mezzanine viewing area for 66,000.
Yeah.
Not recommending connecting Hasty and Ingersoll.
Well, I'm sorry, are you recommending the mezzanine?
Yes, I am. It's under that last column.
Yes. Oh, I'm sorry. I got manager. Okay, so you're only okay. So not the 20,000 connecting. And see what and I think the council. I've noticed this. We're going through a little bit of memory here. We saw the presentation by staff, and they mentioned this.
Right.
And they mentioned it after your recommended came out.
Right.
So I'm crossing my line sometimes. I don't know how the rest of the council. So, okay, so it's just 60. I see it. That's 66,000 for the mezzanine. Okay.
So the mezzanine, I don't know how much that would help or hurt if that's something that we could not do this year and move to next year. And then the same thing with the RO water treatment system. I know it might save us 2% on electricity, but electricity rates are going down. So I would like to know the actual carrying cost of pushing the RO treatment to the next fiscal year rather than this one.
What I'd like to do is talk with Mark Goslin about what are the alternatives to doing that, and come back to you on Monday night with some specifics on that.
That'd be super. Thank you.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, when you follow up, I mean, I think what we're looking at right now is can we add a little bit to the top lot to get that, at least maintain that at a current state? Get rid of the portable stage if the partners aren't ready. That's a tentative. RO water treatment, the mezzanine, and take that monies and reappropriate it to more ROI generating or communications generating activities. And there could be a lot of that, potentials, which we could talk about on Monday or the subsequent week.
Right.
Or give some of it more to the PAL Center.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Could you also ask what so anything in blue is something you've recommended, is that correct, Peter?
I have a black and white sheet that I'm looking at, but if you look at it, you see managers recommended operating column,
Yes.
managers recommended bonding, and managers recommended other.
So managers recommended operating, is that what you're recommending?
I am.
What page you on?
For
So
those
I was just looking at the mezzanine furniture for $10,000 as an operating line.
Mm-hmm.
It might
Yep.
not be super pretty, but they have furniture up there already.
But it's
I mean, that's $10,000 that could go towards tot lot as well.
I've done a couple speeches up there for business groups. It's pretty. Yeah, I throw it out there. I don't disagree that maybe it could be held off, but if you want to try to capture a good rental and a good exposition, whether it be business, NCAA, that is probably the worst choice of furniture and apparel I think I've ever seen in a facility.
Fortunately, Council Walker didn't file a claim, but one claim is going to
Yeah.
more than pay for those chairs and tables. If you
Yes.
remember when he was sitting in one of those chairs.
Oh, that's right.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
I forgot
Yeah,
about
those chairs, if they can't stay, we can't continue running programming there with furniture.
And again, what I'd like to suggest is that I talk with Phil and Mark on how to maybe revise this and talk to you about it on Monday.
I just have one more point to make about that. The mezzanine, I do think, is a safety issue. My family uses Ingersoll, and it is really tough. There are people crowding in the door, so it's not even safe as an egress, but then people are standing right next to that netting. And I watched those softball girls practice, and they have serious power, and somebody is going to get hit. So I do see the mezzanine as being important for safety, and looking at other opportunities for cutting back. Like we had mentioned, maybe filtration weights for another year.
Or the stage might not be ready. Maybe it's
Or the
25,000
stage.
additional just to keep renting them because they're critical. We need it, but we can rent it again temporarily for the next 8 months or so.
I've also had this conversation with the city manager about the baseball field. Pentonville baseball field renovation for $100,000. Is that necessary right now? And I know
I would reference the Huddle Up report done by the consultants 3 years ago, their inventory list of our assets, and the ROI analysis made, and the marketing studies made on number of fields and our deficiencies. And I think we could forward that to you all electronically. We have a serious deficiency within athletic fields in our city for our population, and in order to attract any more sports tourism events.
Yes. They need more field space so that they can host bigger tournaments, playoffs and things.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. I mean, I hear that. It's just a big chunk of money. So
Yeah, no, it is. It is.
I'm just one voice.
We've repositioned the city with the reorganization of recreation and sports tourism, combining those 3 departments into one department for a specific reason, as a strategy to try and position the city to really be the place in Maine where people go for sports tourism. So that's a policy matter for the council to decide if you really want to put investment behind that. But I think there's a lot of positives that are coming out of what we're doing so far. So,
Well, I do appreciate that, and I've read the Huddle Up tour and Huddle Up study, and was in one conversation early on about sports tourism. I don't know if that group continued or not, but I still don't see. And I asked Mark about this. Where's a plan? And he talked to me about a very detailed strategic plan that wasn't something that could be released, and I understand that, but I would love to see even just a response to the Huddle Up study and how we're addressing those in one place.
okay.
And I will remind the council, sports tourism is recession proof, just in case. And I did, that's always just kept in my mind. Not to disagree with that. I absolutely agree with Councilor Rosani. We need all that stuff, but it is a recession proof industry. So that is definitely a benefit we have going into the next couple of years.
And I think it's something to build towards, absolutely. But I just feel that I don't have a picture of it for myself that is a response to the Huddle Up study and how we're addressing what they had talked about. Because they had some pretty big things that I don't see getting done.
Okay.
Also, I'd like to talk about the Ingersoll mezzanine again. I think there should be an engineer to come in and tell us that $66,000 is going to put what we want up there. I'll almost bet my life that $66,000 will not do it. You're going to have to meet the handicap regulations, and that means you're going to have an elevator. And you can't put an elevator in for $66,000. Never mind build anything else on top of this. And it doesn't bring us $1, not $1 to the place. The place is already maxed out. This doesn't bring us anything. We don't want to put in air conditioning because we believe it's a waste of money. It won't bring nobody to the building to bring more sports or bring something thinking out of the box. But we're willing to waste $66,000 because maybe somebody's going to get hurt. We've been open how long? No one's got hurt yet. I would take that chance versus giving $66,000.
You know what I'd like to see? Just throw this out there for conversation, right? This place is packed. It's doing well. Demand is far outstrip supply. We should probably have a detailed marketing study on what it would look like, and does it make sense to have a larger or a secondary or second indoor turf facility, and have a hard conversation, not a hard, but a good conversation with the school department to see if some of the money that they allocated on local share for a secondary practice facility could be partnered in with a large indoor facility, not just to elongate practice time on shoulder months, but to actually elongate practice time throughout the entire off season.
I agree about that. We know that there's a demand for that space.
Mhm.
More demand than a supply.
I'm sorry.
Much more demand than supply. Yeah.
Exactly. And I guess I assume that there's a demand for another ball field, which is great. But again, the money that you're making off of Ingersoll, it's a money maker. And for us to be able to have people doing sports during the winter inside, to me, that seems like a no-brainer and something we should focus on. I don't see that anyway.
Maybe we could see a couple options from city staff. One being, what would a marketing study look like with regards to a new indoor turf facility? So expending money on that versus a mezzanine. Expending money on the mezzanine with the understanding, again, these are options, right? Pushing money towards a mezzanine with the understanding that if the actual cost exceeds the $66,000 budgeted amount, we don't do the program and we reallocate to a secondary expenditure of that money, whether it be for a CIP item or fund balance or to offset programming costs. Does that make sense? Maybe give the council a little bit of options over the next, 2 to 3 weeks to ponder.
We can do that. I think that makes sense. Phil and I can talk with Mark about that. Come back to you with something.
Okay.
And it just helps to move forward this overall plan, strategic plan for tourism.
I approve that as well. And I do think that, to Councillor Walker's point, a mezzanine is not going to generate income, but it is an unresolved safety issue. So if that means it's better to just build a bigger facility and that will generate more income, then so be it. But I think that the safety can't be overlooked.
Well, the nice thing is, if we did build a new facility, we'd take the safety into consideration and design it like that. I mean, this was a co-opted ice arena. So
Right. Yeah. And you can tell.
Yeah, it's like putting lipstick on a pig.
Yeah.
So
it's a great place, though. It really is.
Oh,
this building could still be used and use it for younger, not
sure.
Not such, not the age where people will get hurt. Use it for something younger.
Mm-hmm.
Less of those power balls. Okay. Is there anything else on rec, Ingersoll, Norway? I think we got a lot of good conversation. I think we should move on to.
Is the dog park still included?
No.
Okay, I didn't think so. I just didn't get to the page in time.
Yeah, no, it's not included. Let's transition out to our final topic of the night. And guys, this is a lot. Thank you again. I think I said it during the break. Every minute we spend here should save us 4 to 5 minutes during our council workshops of budget deliberations. So I think it's time well spent. Let's talk about solid waste. Pretty quick conversation. I think the follow-up that we needed to know, and maybe even to punt this to recycle, was the fact that recycling at this point, we're paying an increased amount of disposal fees because the commodities market that is the basis of all recycling during this crisis just doesn't exist. Mm-hmm. It might pick up in 6 months, might not. And I think the conversation needs to happen on, I can't justify in this time or any time, frankly, spending money just to make people feel better about themselves if we're not actually going to be recycling. Does that make sense?
I'll tell you, in all the work that's happening in the recycling committee, one of the major things that comes out of it is if you stop, even for a short time, people lose that habit, that we need to keep it to be able to build on what is currently going on when we have the resources, whether it's a sustainability person or the market changes. So I'll just put that out there.
Thoughts, Council?
So to piggyback on what Councilor Lasagna said, excuse me, that going through the motions on the back end, I don't know what happens to any of my recycling. I sort it all, but I don't know what happens on the back end of it, whether it's getting recycled or not. So I think you're right that we should continue to keep that in motion as best we can. But on the other side, if there's a fiscal responsibility side, that if it's exponentially cheaper to incinerate it than it is to truck it to a recycling facility, that might need to be looked at.
Yeah, I asked myself this question. And if we're asking the school department to make cuts in education deliverance to our children, but we're going to keep a program just to keep people in a habit, I personally, as a taxpayer and resident of Auburn, I've got a really hard time. Basically, I'm choosing to keep people in the habit of recycling, even though we're currently not recycling, or sacrificing education, dollars for dollars. That's a tough call. Now, just throw that out there for a little bit of perspective.
I don't think they're comparable. It's like comparing, we had an earlier comparison about LATC and busing and $15,000 for the tot lot. I think it's not a really appropriate comparison.
Oh, it's appropriate. It might not be relevant, but it's appropriate. So from a school vantage point, okay, they're going to say, well, so this teacher for the 3rd grade at East Auburn or whatever, is it that 75,000 is less important than pretending to recycle so we can feel good about it? So that's the comparison that will be made. You might not think it's appropriate, it's apples to oranges, but it's dollars to dollars.
But I also have to say, if we stop it and the market comes back and COVID, this whole thing will change at some point, what does it take us to restart it again and say, okay, now it's going to cost us, whether at that point it costs $75,000, we adding that? I
don't know. I mean, I'd like to have the recycling committee or Dan Goyette kind of let us know. It's all hypothetical, the restart, but I'm sure there's some case studies.
There is a question that you had raised about the solid waste cost, and Dan has answered that. And we'll show that on the portal, and we can send that to you. There we go. So the average commodity rate is getting better on recycling, but I don't know how much longer it's going to take before it gets to a point that you'd be comfortable with that.
It also may be the opportunity to consider a different company doing our recycling, that we get more for our money.
I think this is
Programming and
We did that 3 years ago.
This is an issue like some other issues that have been raised tonight that I'd like to park for conversation either next Monday or, as the mayor has said, in one of the future meetings that we may have.
Mm-hmm.
If that's agreeable to everybody.
Yes.
As long as it's on radar.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's on radar.
Well, that, and we need to know the percentage. I don't think we've got 4% of the city recycling at this point.
And I think you're right, Councilor Walker, and that's part of the problem, because we haven't put the resources into educating people, working with the schools, doing what it needs to take to raise the recycling amount.
Which could be accomplished with a sustainability coordinator.
The recycling could be done in a lot different, in a different program than we're doing it now. If we know almost everything is no good, maybe bring in a penny, but we know there are a couple items that bring in something else. We need to figure out how we can recycle them that are worth something and make money with them, and then burn the other ones and make people understand that that is still recycling for energy for us to burn at our plant that we own, that we shouldn't be sending it to some other joker because we want to do something.
And people need to know that when they put metal in their trash cans right now, yes, it's burnt, but it's still there, and it's actually then recycled by a metal recycler.
That's right. We recycle it for a certain amount of money.
And that's part of the education that is totally lacking. And again, as Councilor Boss said, a sustainability coordinator do a lot around this.
Okay. Well, let's, like the city manager said, let's park that. That's the last thing on our agenda, and it's 8:15 now. So it's been a good long run. Does anybody have any final parting comments before we call it a night?
Mayor,
I'm glad we didn't stop after an hour and a half. That would have been really disappointing.
Hey, you know what? The rest of the meetings will fly by. You'll thank me later.
No, I appreciate it.
Here.
I don't want to interrupt one of the counselors. I just wanted to show the portal with the questions and answers that you just saw, the question having to do with solid waste.
I can't, it's too small.
Too small? Yeah, it's too small to read, but I just wanted you to see that we have been answering the questions for you. And if you go to the website, you can find the answers to the questions. We can also send it to you by email if that would be easier.
You know, I was going to say, as counselors, why don't you send it to us and then we don't have to go fishing for it?
Okay.
What you're able to do on the website is if you're looking for a specific question by department, you can just click on here and say, I want to see what that recreation question was. Click on recreation, and then there were 4 or 5 questions on recreation. You click on that, and your answer comes up on the side.
It's actually really good if you decide to navigate it, I have to say.
I tell you what, I'd like to see our entire budget next year on this.
Is this another Rosemary project, this portal right here?
Yes.
This is a
Rosemary
combination
and
of
Liz.
Rosemary and Liz.
Rosemary and Liz.
They're phenomenal.
They
They
are.
are phenomenal.
Don't compliment them too much; it goes to their head.
That's a
No.
good thing.
Okay, that's perfect. It's great. Listen, but that is a cool
All right.
site.
Okay.
Is there anything else, Phil, Peter?
No, that's
No.
it.
Good.
I appreciate this extra time we spent. I was joking about the hour and a half because you're right. It will make it, we'll feel much more confident and be able to move much more smoothly through the discussions.
Hope so. Okay.
And
well,
save a little money there, Mr. Mayor, because you're gonna have to take us all out to dinner, you know.
I can't. I can't. No more than 2 of you at the same time. Sorry.
Well, then take it out of your budget, the mayor's
We'll
budget.
invite the public.
BYOB. Okay, folks. Have a great night. Take care. We'll talk to you Monday.
Good
Thank
night.
you.
Thank
Bye.
you very much. Bill, you want